This podcast is intended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
But the sleepy assassin, Mr. Austin Felix, welcome to the Bass Galaxy. It's a damn honor, dude.
Yeah, it's been a while, huh?
It has been a while, and I'm sorry I haven't been more forthcoming about this. I've been dreaming about this day, though, and it's an honor to have you out here, dude, so thanks for making the trip.
Yeah, figure we better get it done before we hit the road again.
It's probably a lot easier that way. I guess you leave, like, what, in a week and a half?
Yeah, I'm going to leave on the 30th to head to Georgia, start rigging the boat at Sonar Pros.
Cool. I saw that new boat. It's sexy, but what I'm really excited about is you brought looks like some nice bourbon with you tonight.
Yeah.
So, like, this is going to be not only a fun conversation, but we're gonna sample some damn bourbon throughout this podcast, which is, to me, it's extra special. So I'll cheers to that. What did you bring me? And I guess I didn't know you were into bourbon or a connoisseur.
I mean,
if you
I
will.
like drinking. I'm not a connoisseur. I'm not going to be able to explain to you, and I don't really collect it that much. I like drinking it. I bring a old-fashioned kit in a backpack everywhere we go, usually just with a big bottle of Woodford. But
Sure.
I got a buddy, Kevin, who lives down in Kentucky. He has a couple taco restaurants, the local taco it's called, and
I love tacos.
they got a full bar in them, and he sells a ton of liquor, so he gets an allocation to a lot of these fancy liquors, and he's all about it. And he was nice enough to
move your mic up just a bit.
Yeah, he was nice enough to give me a couple fancy bottles here.
Yeah.
Cracked one bottle at my wedding here last fall, a Pappy, and yeah, I would not spend $1,000 for a bottle of bourbon, but
I'm not that guy either, but there's something about bourbon on ice with, like, just having a few of those. It doesn't seem to mess me up, like, as bad as if you drank a pile of beers. If you just have, like, 2-3 bourbons, there's just something special about it.
oh yeah,
But
I'll crack one every once in a while.
so I got us a bottle of Woodford, I guess. Are these kind of fancy bottles that we're looking
Yeah,
at? I
just
don't
a-
recognize either of them.
A Weller 12 and an Elmer T.
Okay.
Yeah, they're sought after.
Sure.
They'd be expensive on the secondary market. I don't know really what it is. Like I said, I've never bought anything on the second market, but
Yeah, I'm
hundreds of dollars.
holy shit. See, and I don't spend that on whiskey, so that's cool that you know a guy, a little Kentucky plug.
Yeah.
That's cool.
No, he's a good buddy. He actually comes up here. He knows Andy. He knows Brad.
Sure.
He traveled with me for the Open at St. Clair last year as a co-angler, and just, yeah, he's really into fishing and kind of does the whole deal. It's really funny. I actually, sort of in a roundabout way, got him into tournament fishing because back in my FLW days, he won a raffle to be a co-angler for an FLW tour event, and drew me the first day of his only ever, like, bass fishing tournament. Before that, it was just kind of fun fishing. So
Sure.
I took him on his first tournament day ever, and then we didn't really talk much for a couple of years, and he ended up becoming friends with Andy Young and stuff, and came up here. He comes up here and guides with him every once in a while and stuff. So we kind of ran into each other. He went through Sonar Pros. I ran into him there, and it was just kind of like, oh, hell. Yeah, so.
Well, speaking of Andy Young, I mean, you and Andy go way back. I think he's kind of out of the tournament game too, but I guess let's dive into kind of, I guess, where you started and where you're at now. I mean, you're an Elite Series Bass Pro, and not many people can say that from the state of Minnesota, but you cut your teeth, on Lake Minnetonka, the Silverados. That's kind of where I was introduced to you as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Looking up to you, I guess, and then your dad fishes a little bit, but I guess tell me about kind of the beginning phases, because that to me is always pretty integral in how you fish and developing that fishing style that takes you further. But you seem to be ahead of the curve, but where did it start?
Yeah, I sort of grew up in tournament fishing. When I was young, our whole deal was go up to the cabin. We had a 14-foot V hull like most people started out with. my dad loved to fish and hunt and stuff, and we would do it all the time, but it was kind of go out and fish for whatever bit, go
Sure.
trolling for pike, do whatever. And my old man's an attorney, and one of his clients, when I was, I don't know how old I was, maybe 8-10 years old, he was a big tournament angler around here. The old timers probably that are still around probably know him. His name was Mike Mitchner. He's
Okay.
passed away now, but he fished Denny's with my dad for a long time, fished a lot of like the river stuff with him. But my dad had a bunch of bass fishing pictures in his office, so he's like, "Oh, you like to fish?" And he's like, "Oh yeah." But one thing led to another, and they ended up, Mike needed a tournament partner, so they kind of started fishing tournaments together, and I got drug along to practice, which at the time was the coolest thing on earth. Like,
Absolutely.
so that's how I got started in it. Obviously, Dad was pretty good at what he had his niches and stuff. I mean, a lot of the guys that fall Prior Lake tournament every year, he was always chomping at the bit for that one. Always loved cranking a magwort and that kind of stuff. And once I got old enough to fish, then we started fishing together. And yeah, after that it was Denny's. It was Silverado. Actually fished with Andy Young. I was a co-angler in the Silverado, the final tournament of the year, right over here on not Coronas. What's the other one we drive by?
Oh, Green? Or,
No.
no, Clearwater.
Now the river right here.
Oh, Horseshoe Chain.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
I
on the
remember
horseshoe
that.
chain.
I grew up
I was-
on the Horseshoe Chain.
Yeah,
That's
we
the
were.
home lake.
I was his co-angler for that tournament when he won the like AOI for the Silverado. So
I remember that.
we've been kind of intertwined with all this stuff. It was really good fun. And
Cool.
then, like, me and Seth and Fig ran around a lot together and fished some together. We fished more against each other than with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because, like, Seth's obviously done it all in the Elite Series, and we fished some tournaments together, but me and Fig fished more tournaments together and had a lot more success than me and Seth ever did. Like, we'd do all right, but I think me and Fig won, like, 80% of the tournaments we fished together for whatever reason.
Well, I had a similar experience with like James Chapman. We would just when we didn't fish together, we'd each do really well, and then when we'd fish together, it seemed like we'd have one good finish out of the whole trail type of deal. And I don't know, there's something to, I guess, how people, the chemistry in the boat and how people fish together. I mean, in my mind, you and Seth are kind of both alphas front of the boat, versus Fig, I think, is more willing to, you know, maybe, or
Yeah.
what do you think, why do you think that was, I guess? Not that it's a big deal or nothing.
I really couldn't put a finger on why it happened one way or another. I mean, it seemed like if Seth and I fished together, we fished like 4 Denny's Wednesday nighters in a row and got second in like all of them.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Right, but it was like
Like, that's not bad, dude.
me and Fig fished a few, with the exception, like Fig and I fished Sturgeon Bay Open a few years ago, a few years in a row, and we had success. Like, we're cashing checks, made the top 5 twice for the final day sort of weigh-in thing and stuff. But like fishing around here, when we get in the boat together, it just seemed like magic would happen.
Sure.
Like the big ones would show up, one or two of us would do something special, and like we'd win a tournament. It was like,
That's what's up.
yeah.
And then you fished with Willie Papa, I think, after that, right?
Yeah.
Shout out, Willie.
Yeah, he's a special guy. One
I
of my
mean,
favorite people.
one of mine, too, and there's really nobody like him. And he's, I think, an avid listener, and I almost thought about bringing him on tonight, but I didn't want to dumb down our conversation too much.
I'd have had to bring another bottle.
Yeah, we would not have had enough booze here.
No, yeah, I haven't actually got to fish with Willie much in the last couple of years since I started traveling. 'Cause he's
Yeah.
doing the NABC stuff or team trail stuff, and it just seems like I haven't got to fish really at home much. This last spring was the first time I fished Denny's in 4 or 5 years. Managed to get out there with the old man for the first event of the year, but
Sure.
you're fortunate enough. The Hengels that bought it like save a couple spots just for like us, and I schedule lines up. So this year again, I'll be able to fish that first one. Fortunately,
Heck
get
yeah.
the old man out there again, because like it's kind of want to get him out when we can.
Right.
Like he's still doing good, but he doesn't have his own boat now, and yeah, I'm always gone. So
What's what's your quick side quest? What's your thoughts on like nowadays Minnetonka versus like when you had more of your heyday there?
I mean, I hate it. Although I don't spend much time. Like I fish the spring tournament. Obviously, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I haven't
Yep.
spent a lot of time in the summer or the fall anymore. It's because now it's changed so much, and I don't want to do that super deep coontail deal. I haven't really spent the time. If I have a free day out here, I'd much rather drive to Mille Lacs and try to figure that out more.
There's
in the
so
hope.
many good places to go besides there.
Yeah, it's just like the hopes that one day Bassmaster will come back to Mille Lacs and I'll be able to fish a big tournament there. Like, I'm so jealous that Seth got to fish 2 events there in the fall. It's just like, God, I can't even imagine what that was like, especially those 2 events when it wasn't known.
Right.
It must have been like the greatest tournament in the world.
Oh my God, 2D'ing boulders. I mean, yeah, he fucking made it look stupid, but I bet you, yeah. So like, what kind of made you like? When did you take the step towards the elites with the opens? And then how long did it take you? I remember I've watched you every step of the way. I just can't remember like that exact path, and like what made you feel like it was time to do that and whatnot.
Yeah, so I went back to college at the U of M and fished through them. 2014, was fortunate enough to win that FLW National Championship, and it was kind of like an eye-opening experience to me because I didn't think we could compete. Like, I think a lot of guys around here have that same idea. They don't think they can compete down south because we've all fished Mille Lacs, we've all fished Minnetonka, and you have to know like the spot on the spot and like have all the secrets and everything just
Sure.
to compete against the other guys on Denny's, because everybody spends so much time out there. So I'm like, God, how am I going to go down south and get that much knowledge about each specific lake? And it was college fishing that let me know that as long as you have a pretty good idea of what bass patterns are and you kind of like do a little bit of research,
Sure.
it's much easier to pattern fish down south. Like Minnesota in general isn't really a pattern lake for the most part.
I don't disagree. The big thing to me down south is how intimidating, like the size of bodies of water are, and then just it's a different looking environment. So,
Sure.
I think that was the first thing for me that was intimidating, going to Lake Hartwell or something like that. But like once you I caught a bass doing this, you go do that again, like down south, and pattern it. To your point, it's just a matter of the intimidation of the size of the lake, being able to run 30 miles on most of the reservoirs you guys fish, so it's I guess to me I'm curious, like some of the tricks that you've used or that you used to break down those bodies of water, and I guess how you got less intimidated, or you mentioned it being intimidating at first. How did you kind of break that barrier?
I mean, it was really just traveling, like leaning into electronics at the time and side scan, like being confident doing that
Yep.
made your learning curve a lot faster, similar to how like forward facing now has made everybody's learning curve a lot faster, even still on new bodies. But it was like, so the college schedule I had was Kentucky Lake, the Detroit River, and then Lake Kiwi, which is just above Hartwell.
Yep.
It's Blueback Lake. So it's like we
Yep.
kind of got to see a little bit of everything, and the fact that I had success everywhere, and it's like, okay, it still all makes sense. Once you get down there, you maybe don't get as many bites because there's more pressure and they don't have ice half the year. But
Sure.
just doing that made me realize that I might be able to, like, I should shoot my shot.
Sure.
Fortunately,
Sure.
it's frustrating because if you win the college national championship, you don't automatically get a berth into the FLW tour. So I was trying to get in there, and I didn't get in my first year. So I fished a division of the Opens, the Northerns. Actually was like right on the cusp of qualifying going into the final event.
I remember that.
And I bombed the final event. It was Sandusky, Lake Erie.
Oof. Which at the time was not as good as it is now, right?
It wasn't, and it was like, in hindsight, I wasn't ready to be there anyways. Like what I learned in 4 years at FLW was very important to my success once I finally moved over. But so I fished 1 year, the Opens, almost made it, bombed the last tournament, finished in the teens or something in AOI, but had a top 10 and thought like I could compete against 200 people. And the next year I bought a Ranger boat so I could get signed up for the FLW tour a day earlier because they catered to Ranger guys.
Sure.
And talked to Bill Taylor. He's like, yeah, as long as you call right at 9, we'll get you in. So I got in, fished the first year. And yeah, spent doing that for 4 years with quite a bit of success. Missed the Forest Cup my rookie year just because it took me 4 tournaments to kind of figure out how to practice. I missed checks the first 4 tournaments I fished in. And it took a little while to kind of understand what we had to do.
And I guess what was that like? That I understand what you mean, like figuring out how to break down the water in the time you have the quickest and put together a system and patterns. And I guess what were some mistakes that you made those first 4 that you feel like you corrected and developed kind of some success after that?
Yeah, just the speed you have to break down things. Like you have to find stuff, but you can't perfect it in practice. Like if you get an idea, it's almost like, okay, I got an idea, let's leave it alone and find something else. And the first day of the tournament, I'll see if that was actually really happening. So by the time I was like doing consistently well, the first day of the tournament was kind of like where I'm unboxing all these packages of like, okay, I've got this pattern going, let's see if it's actually a thing, and we'll like run it for more than 10 minutes.
Sure.
And so it's like, so then the first day of the tournaments, you're throwing half your stuff out the window and consolidating what's actually working.
Sure.
But it gives you essentially a 4th day of practice because you didn't waste too much time on any one thing the first 3 days.
Huh.
So that kind of helped. I learned always go to your best fish first.
No matter what your boat draw is?
No matter what, just try to get to them and go there immediately. Like I should have had a really good tournament my rookie year on Pickwick, but I had a bank flipping smallmouth deal, like flipping a tube on a cut bank where I caught some like 4-pound smallmouth. But
that's gangster.
I also found like the only ledge spot on the whole lake at the time that was kicking out any fish, like the only school I found the whole week. But it was supposed to blow like 20 miles an hour starting at like 9:30, and it was going to just blow out this whole bank. So I'm like, oh, if I want to fish this, I got to start on it. So like, and it was within sight of the ledge at school. So like, all right, I'm going to start there, make one quick pass, and then go do it. And like, started there, made one pass, and it was already done. Didn't get a bite. Watched Canterbury freaking drive around me, sit on it, and top 10 the tournament. He caught 22 pounds in like the first 20 minutes on camera and stuff. I'm just like, well, that's one quick lesson to learn.
So those ledge fish were bigger than the 4-pound smallmouth and more schooled up? Or
again, like I didn't know exactly what I had.
Sure.
But that was...
You hadn't opened the box yet.
Yeah, like I had an idea that like... That was probably the most consistent thing. That I just like, I felt like I needed to like check this other stuff on the way to it. And I felt like I had to like always go to your best fish first is what I really learned. If you have an idea, unless it's something real sneaky, it's just, that's kind of what we had to do. It's just between that and just time management and.
Sure. How do you, man? Like, are you more of a, like, do you run a lot of water, or are you more of a patience meets virtue kind of guy?
In practice or an event?
An event. You get you find 6 packages, you find 10 packages, you find 12 packages, however many you find, right? Some tournaments yield sitting more, some tournaments yield running more. So like that's me if I'm answering the question. But like, like your fishing style, like are you more of a run and gun, or are you more like get intimate with an area? It seems like you run and gun a lot in practice, and then maybe like tournament day.
So I'll keep running. I'm not going to wait for fish to bite. Like that whole idea that like, oh, they're here, we're just going to sit here. For the most part, I will never do that. Very few exceptions is like Tennessee River if you're just waiting for current or something. But even then, I like to run until I hit the current and then kind of like run it back or like chase the current, same way you do with like a tidal fishery.
Sure.
Yeah, I tend to move a lot. Like I don't tend to go through things and like try to milk them completely. Like I'd rather go through something once, go check something else, and if it was successful the first time, go back after it's rested to see if you can catch a few more.
Sure.
So it'll be like you'll run back and forth to stuff, but it's not just pull down and grind.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess looking at these big bodies of water, and are you a guy who spends a lot of time looking at maps and whatnot? And just for me, there's a difference between like looking at information, like where people are catching them, all of that, versus like just understanding the terrain and the map, like intimately, knowing what creeks are dirty versus clean, knowing, there's tricks where you can go back in time and look at different lake levels. Like, what are some things that you use to kind of hack your time? It's all about efficiency and time.
I mean, I don't really do a lot of map study.
Sure.
Because once you're on the water, it's kind of like once you get a bite, once you get an idea, then you can just zoom out and try to figure out, okay, from here, if I'm running upriver, if I'm running downriver, where's the next thing that's similar? And we'll just run that.
Sure.
Or therefore, you got to be fluid with your ideas and like depending on what's going on. I used to do a lot of watching YouTube, watching old Bassmaster stuff. I've been to a majority of the lakes we go to now enough, so I kind of know the way around and kind of like have an idea what's going on. I have some waypoints on a lot of stuff, so like I know what was good in the past, so I can kind of check that stuff to see if it's still something similar or if we have to throw it out.
How much stuff have you had to throw out, would you say?
It changes based on time of year,
right?
The season. We've been to St. John's 5 times. I got a million waypoints there, so it's kind of like figure out if any of them are good. But that's the other thing I learned in FLW quickly is like, don't be afraid to just throw everything out the window. If it's not working, you're going to have to do something different because you can't just bang your head against the wall.
Right. So I like that style, but like when you get to a new body of water, where do you start? Obviously, it depends on time of year, but are you the type of guy, let's say it's, midsummer, do you start by idling?
A lot of times. Idling or just scoping. Now, it depends if it's a largemouth lake or a smallmouth lake. Like,
sure.
Smallmouth don't tend to show up on side scan anymore. Or if they never really did unless they were like stacked on a pile or something. So like for largemouth, I'll scan stuff just to look for structure, or you'll still be able to see them on bars and whatnot. But for smallmouth, it's more put the trolling motor down and use your scope the same way you would use your side scan, just as fast as you can go. It's not really about fishing, it's about scanning.
Sure. Well, you spent some time with that old scope.
Yeah.
I remember our first and only time in the boat together. You taught me some stuff about scope, and I'll never forget that day, and I'm grateful for it. And I guess what's kind of the evolution that you've had with Livescope in terms of your learning curve and like where you started versus where you are now and where you'd like to be?
I mean, I'm not good enough at it yet, I don't feel like, but we keep learning new stuff and it keeps changing. The regular throw them at them and catch them isn't the deal anymore. It requires a lot more finesse now, I guess it'd probably be the way to say it, or you
Sure.
have to just think outside the box the same way you do with any other type of fishing, with that now it gets this much pressure, and just like bass fishing in general is getting so much pressure. But like there's a lot I still want to learn. I haven't really got to play with the whole perspective bedfish thing like we saw like Corey do on St. John's last year. Like that was a big deal last year in the springtime, but I never ran into the right scenario
Sure.
where I found it to be the deal. So I'm still waiting to kind of figure that out.
It's fun. That just being up here in Minnesota, it actually perspective has, I think, a lot of utility in Minnesota just in general with how a lot of the smallmouth stuff lays out. If the water, like Coronis, for example, like the water's dirty, you can't see in 5 feet of water very good. So that perspective, like, opens up a whole new world. And yeah, but anyway.
Yeah,
carry on.
I've caught smallmouth off of it
Sure.
and stuff, but it's just that like Florida strain bedding largemouth thing I thought was really cool. I just really want to try it because I've heard like multiple people everywhere from Louisiana all the way to Florida and stuff. It's like it can be it can be hard to beat, and it can be a really powerful tool when you can see them and get a bait on them before they know you're there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll see.
Before they know you're there. So like, how far are these guys shooting their perspective out, and like what distance is that, and like what is that?
Perspective, as far as I understand it, like when we're doing it, is you can't shoot it out more than say 50 feet if you want a good picture.
For bed fishing?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, do you think that fish doesn't know you're there 50 feet away? You know?
I don't think it feels the pressure of the boat like near as much as say like if you ran by it once and you're like, oh, there he is, mark it, come back around. Like if you haven't spooked him yet.
That kind of first creep you're talking. There's something essential to that. I agree.
Like in general, if you can get a bait on a fish before they know you're there, like they're way more intent on biting.
Yeah. Do you still fuck with a fish that knows you're there? Like, you're a good sight fisherman. Like, everybody I talk to speaks very highly of your sight fishing abilities. So I'd love to learn something with that. And I'm just curious if you've taken that to the screen and, some things you've learned that are maybe similar with sight fishing that you're now able to do with Livescope and some of that stuff. I don't know if there's parallels there or not.
Yeah, I played with it a little bit again. Once you get to the Livescope, you kind of get away from sight fishing. In a sense,
Sure.
you're sight fishing because you can see the fish, or like you can get a read on the fish through the screen, but it's a completely different deal than watching them with your eyes, because like once you got your eyes on them, it's almost like close quarters combat. Like you're doing something based on their actions and the way their movement is and like how they want to set up and stuff. So it's like one-on-one, like exchanging blows, whereas
It's more intimate.
so
Yeah.
as opposed to just scope and mille lacs and stuff you can't see, and there's a rock and throw to it. Same thing you do all summer, but just like shallower, and you watch fish come up and like eat it. You're like, okay, that fish was on a bed. Once you drive up there, you can see it, but it's just kind of like same thing as I was talking largemouth. It's if you get the bait on them, you can catch them right away.
Sure.
I don't-
Really? Largemouth.
Both.
Both. Yeah. So I guess that's an interesting placement to me is super important with Livescope. Do you think that's more important than presentation, or do you think both are equally important?
Placement is in like bait placement?
Yeah, like you said, you put it on top of one, they're going to eat it.
Yeah. Well, again, if you can hit them and this works for forward even better than perspective, but if you can hit the rock they're laying on or get it close to.
Hey guys, Aaron Teal here with Veselka Fishing and Customs here, and excited to talk to you about my new signature series rod, the Puppet Master. My number one confidence technique is by far offshore power finesse fishing, so we've spent a lot of time and a lot of years creating the perfect bottom contact power finesse rod, specifically designed to fish 3/8 to 3/4 ounce football jigs, tubes, swing heads, dragging a swim bait on the bottom, and any bait that you need to manipulate with your hand and land that fish. This rod is perfect for it. The big thing that we found that was an issue with other rods is they were either too crisp and sensitive, where they were too fast, or they weren't quite sensitive enough and they had the right action. So what Dane built with this rod is the most sensitive bottom contact rod I've ever held in my hands. But the big thing is, on a long cast, it's got the power to drive that hook home, but more importantly, it's got a parabolic action that's going to bend deep down in the rod to make sure that, let's say, football jig or goby tube isn't popping that smallmouth's mouth open and keeping that bait in the back of their head where it belongs, allowing you to have increased leverage and landing more bass. You're going to have to pry this rod from my cold dead hands. This is the Puppet Master. You can find it on veselkafishing.com or at Waypoint Angler Supply. Check them out.
The rock they're laying on 50, 60 feet away, they're going to be way more willing to swim an extra 2 feet away to eat that bait before they feel your pressure.
Right.
As opposed to like being on top of them, and then you got to figure out where the eggs are on the map and just work the spot until you piss them off. So I feel like it allows you to be less specific with your casts.
Sure. So, like, if you were to give advice to people who wanted to catch more bass with Livescope, what's 1 to 3 key pieces of advice you would give them after spending all the time you have with it? Because you've spent a lot of time with it. And maybe you're the type of guy it's never good enough. And that's why you're a fierce competitor. That's why you're a fierce warrior, is because you're never fully satisfied. Us as bass fishermen, that's how we are. Or that's how I am too, to an extent. But you have spent a lot of time with it. And I would consider you an expert compared to most people listening probably to this podcast on the Livescope. So, like, if somebody's trying to catch more bass with Livescope, what's 1 to 3 things you would say they should know?
I mean, really, it's dumbed down, but you just kind of have to, like anything else, lock it in your hand and use it for a while, because efficiency with it is almost more important than anything else. When conditions are optimal and it's calm and you can line up on a fish and be like, okay, there he is, and lay the bait on him because it's 0 to 5 mile an hour winds, and hit him on the head. Like, a lot of people can do that and a lot of people will catch a fish, but when you're on Champlain and it's blowing 15 out of the south and there's 3-footers and you kind of have to go with them because your trolling motor can't even push you into it, so everything's moving. You need to get the muscle memory of casting, just like you would skipping a dock or anything else, where you can be like, okay, based on what's on the screen, just you automatically understand, like, okay, that's 40 foot away, and you can almost feel based on where your foot angle is, and you can put the bait over there quickly so you can hit that fish even in like non-optimal conditions.
Sure.
Plus the fish is moving, so like you put it over there and then your boat's moving, the fish is moving, and you got to be able to track the bait to see if it's falling where you want it to fall, and if not, we're going to make the correction, make another cast because you didn't judge where the fish was swimming at the same time. Like, it's just something that requires hours looking at it to like really dial it in if you want to do it effectively in all conditions. Other than that, like in calm, ideal conditions, at this point I've noticed that rate of fall seems to have a really big effect on whether or not you're going to get bit. Some fish,
That's a the most the sneakiest trick in plain sight to me is that.
yeah, because obviously heavier bait, it's going to get to the fish faster, but you're going to have to move it a lot faster in order to get the same action or the action you want out of it. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. At the same time, a really light bait or a lighter bait, it's going to take a lot longer to get down to them, but you can almost hover it in place and it gives them, it'll just irritate them. It'll be there long enough that more fish will get irritated just by the fact that it stays in the strike zone that much longer, that you'll be able to coax a few more bites that aren't nearly as active fish.
Sure.
So playing with that kind of deal, I throw everything from a 1/16 of an ounce all the way to a half.
Based on so there's a lot of techniques you can use obviously for forward facing sonar, but as far as weight goes, let's just say, and we're going to get to the goods of the magic of this chef in the kitchen here, but when you're looking at depth and hovering a bait over the bass with your scope, based on the depth, what's your kind of general rule of thumb for weight to depth ratio?
If I'm going to practice, I'll usually start, I got an 1/8 ounce head and a 1/4 ounce head rigged up.
Sure.
Anything less than 15 feet, I want to go with an 1/8 ounce. I tend to go light. They sink a lot faster than you think, and the fish will see them. If a fish is 10 feet down over 15 feet, you don't have to get 10 feet down. If you get 4 or 5 foot down, most likely the fish is already going to know it's there if you hit them with it or you get it close to them. So it's not like you have to take all 10 foot up and make it land in their mouth. If it's working, they should come part of the way.
Sure.
So yeah, I run a lot of 1/8, and then if it's deeper, 1/4, even 3/8 if it gets really deep. And it also depends on largemouth or smallmouth,
Size of the minnow,
and the speed in which they're swimming around. Like smallmouth feeding on bait that are moving that fast and everything are going to require a heavier bait, and you're still going to need to make multiple casts before you hit them.
Sure.
Whereas largemouth spotted bass sitting on a brush pile, you're going to want the opposite effect. You want something slow that hovers over that brush pile as long as possible to give you more of an opportunity to coax that fish into biting.
Interesting. Sure.
And you sacrifice weight. So even if you have to wait 5 seconds, 6 seconds, just watch her get down there. But once it does, you can just almost shake your slack line the same way you would a drop shot, but just as long as you keep a little bit of that tension, you can keep those lighter baits just not moving forward but still moving like they're supposed to.
That was probably that epiphany I had in the boat with you when we were shaking a minnow in 6 to 8 feet of water, and you were showing me how far the bait was moving and just how easy it was to levitate and hover that thing. That was a really cool moment, Austin. And
I think we were throwing 3/16 or a little heavier jigs because I think that's all we had too. So
we were doing well. You had asked for a lighter one. You boat flipped a 2 3/4 3 pounder, broke your rod. I remember, and then you asked for a rod, and then I think you had an 1/8 after that. But you started just taking a 3/16, and I was pretty impressed with your ability to keep that thing going. And you've played with a lot of jig heads, obviously, but so settings wise, this is my last question before I get into the cooking in the kitchen. And I'm gonna need, speaking of cooking in the kitchen, but I forgot what I was gonna ask, but settings wise, how important do you think that is in the grand scheme of things? And
settings in what sense?
In your forward facing sonar.
You can tweak stuff, but if you have good power, that's the main thing. You want designated power running to your electronics so you can be as clear as possible. But factory settings from a Garmin will get you 95% of the way there, at least with a forward.
Sure.
When you get into perspective, it gets a little trickier, because even if you're shooting like 50 feet out, that beam is only giving you a really good picture for a small portion of that. It's almost like there's a stripe in your screen where like you have to drive through that stripe, and like that's where the good picture is. So like a bed will be on the screen, but it won't be very easy to see, and you drive through the stripe of it, and like then it appears and you can see the dot in the middle, and then it'll almost disappear again as it gets closer to the boat, as it gets out of the beam. So like that requires more tinkering to kind of figure out where you want it.
Well, even the angle of it, right?
Yeah. But as far as forward goes, I like to crank up my color gain a lot, and I like to crank everything up and make it like pretty hot. I don't really care if I get some interference.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can look through the interference to pick out fish that I'll be able to see further away.
Sure.
Color palette can make a difference. Some of them it's kind of on or off. It's either like fully bright or dark. Whereas others, like I run the amber quite a bit just because it seems like there's levels of amber. Like the darkness isn't just like full on or full off. So you can kind of make out the differences of like a shade. So like it helps with picking out fish that are close to the bottom, that kind of thing, or fish that are stuck against trees and stuff.
Sure. So the amber with
yeah,
the color gain turned up, it gives you better, because that to me is like, I would say if the Garmin had one area that I feel like I could improve in my settings, it's bottom separation. And I feel like sometimes maybe I'm even not seeing them.
So you're saying compared to the Lowrance? Or
So
what are you running?
I ran the Garmin, and then I have a buddy of mine who runs a Lowrance, and I just fishing with him, I did notice that better bottom separation. I would still take the Garmin for other reasons, you know.
So yeah, so I was with Lowrance for most of my career. 2 or 3 years ago, I stepped away from Lowrance so I could run everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Lowrance Active Target is very good, probably the best if it's like open water, hard bottom. So like Mille Lacs and a lot of smallmouth stuff, you do get a little better bottom separation.
Sure.
But when it comes to looking through weed edges or like picking out big ones that are laying up against the side of like sunken trees and stuff,
Sure.
they just don't stick out the way Garmin does, and the Garmin can like see through it and like make out stuff at distance past like a grass line and stuff.
Sure. I
And
feel like
for
you can pick up your bait a lot easier on the Garmin.
Yeah, you can. It's a wider cone, so.
I think that's for my shitty putts.
And then the other thing is like distance you're willing to shoot.
Sure.
And you can shoot and still see a bait and still see a fish.
Right.
And like I'm confident I can see a smallmouth swimming off the bottom with my Garmin 200 feet out. Whereas everything else, the Lowrance, unless it's really deep, the Lowrance kind of dies at like 140, 160.
Are you running the saltwater one, or are you talking LVS 34 here?
I ran both last year.
Sure. At 200, are you talking you can pick them up with the F34, or are we talking the saltwater?
No, I ended up running the saltwater twice. I mean, you might have seen it. I ended up selling it on the Minnesota Bass, mainly because we couldn't use it anymore. But I didn't. It was cool for what it was. I didn't think it gave me any advantage really over the 34 that I couldn't do on my own.
I don't think it's ever been really broken down on a podcast, but like, what is the main difference? Obviously, I know you can see a lot further, right? More like, and saltwater transducers are designed to have more power, reach more depth, have more detail. I don't even know, man.
Yeah, it works. It's got a ton of power. So the main thing when shooting at distance is the depth of the water.
Sure.
The deeper it is, the further you're going to be able to shoot. But most of the time, I didn't find it helped until I got 50 plus. And around here, we're not really going to shoot 50 plus. I know a few guys who love the thing. Taku runs one on perspective all the time.
That saltwater perspective is, how far does that thing shoot with perspective?
Oh, it'll shoot just as far. Like you can shoot at 120 and that kind of thing. It's just your picture. And
oh yeah, you need a massive screen.
It's just it shrinks everything so much. It's the same thing if you try to side scan out to 160. Like everything gets so small.
Right.
Trying to pick out anything gets difficult. Some of the guys have got it figured out, I guess. Like Hamner ran it all last year. He won the Classic, and like there are a few guys using it. Obviously, they're not going to be using it anymore. We only have one unit. But
like talking to Fothergill, this is pre-new rules. He said that in an ideal scenario, he would have 2 in forward, 1 far range, 1 close range.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about like what I heard about Kyoya on Champlain. It's like with that saltwater deucer, you're almost tracking that fish, positioning yourself to get it to that close screen.
Yeah.
And then catching it and using that kind of broader saltwater picture as a finding and positioning tool.
But you didn't need the saltwater. Like I was doing that last year with just 234s.
Cool.
Like on St. Clair last year for the Open, I would shoot 1 to 250 and 1 to 100, and you just like scan with 250 and then run them down until you got it to 100 where you had it on the big screen and you could figure out everything and put your bait and everything.
How good are you at like telling the difference between species, like looking at it?
Usually I'm pretty good with it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you pulled up 10 screenshots, I'm not going to be able to tell you what they are, but like if we're on St. Clair, I can tell you after fishing for a little while, like if they're walleye or bass or drum.
Sure.
For the most part.
What's one tip you would give for that identifiable factor of a bass versus another species? Because I feel like that's an area I could improve, so I'm genuinely a little curious. And I've heard different theories, but yet I've seen so many different, I feel like, moods, you know? Like
a lot of it you can't be too sure about until you put a bait on them and see how they react. Like the speed in which they react to something and the way they move, or like how skittish they are, has a lot to do with it. Bass just in general aren't that skittish. Like they'll run up to stuff or like, but their general movement is a lot slower than even walleye usually be when they're
like they move slower than a walleye.
Yeah, they just like they look lazier on the screen.
Sure. Like, are we talking largemouth, smallmouth, or both?
We're talking both before you put a bait on them.
Sure. Smallmouth are a little faster to the bait, I bet.
Yeah, and I mean largemouth will be too, and it's kind of a. And if they like 45 to your bait when they see it, like it's probably a bass, just because most of them. Walleye will get really excited, but it seems like you got to put it in their face.
Sure.
Unless it's springtime, then they'll just go bananas. Drum are the same way. Drum don't like to travel far and like don't like to get really aggressive.
Sure.
And then I don't know what else we really look at a lot. Like
carp, I suppose, or carp seem to be spooky. Like,
yeah, like Asian carp or just carp in general. Yeah, they'll just run and just keep going. Whereas bass, the other thing about it is like when they decide to make a move or get spooked or whatever, it's usually like a short burst.
Sure.
But I'm no master of that whole deal. I don't think it's really that important. And like the more important thing is getting a bait on every fish you think may or may not be. And
them showing interest and interacting with what you're doing is an indicator that it's probably a bass.
Yeah.
Or a very good sign. The only thing I can think of is one time I found a brush pile and I thought there was a bunch of bass on it, and they're just really big crappies.
Crappies, yeah. Crappies, yeah. They'll sit in the top and they'll follow you around, but usually you can get one of them to bite
Yeah.
or a lot of times, and then you kind of figure that out too. You're like, oh, they're sitting right on the tip. If they're sitting on the tip of the brush pile and there's 7 of them sitting there, it's probably not bass.
Right.
Unless you're on Lake Lanier, in which case it probably is.
Well, if they are, they're probably ready to go, and you're going to catch one first cast if they're like that high and active, I would assume, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love what you said about, and this isn't, what I like about it is it's not the quick, easy thing that people want to hear, but the spending time with it and like the hours spent. And I think about like the better years I've had in Minnesota were me spending time with side imaging and the Lowrance .1 and really kind of putting all of those pieces together. But I feel like idling is so much easier to do than like scoping is more work. You have to probably stand up. You have to like move around. You have to battle wind and practice that shit. And I think back to like a lot of the just cool shit I found spending time, and that would have been my number one advice about side imaging is spend some time with it, get intimate with it, right?
You got to put on the miles.
But that scope thing, it seemed like I didn't adopt it like I did, side scan. Maybe because it was harder, maybe because I didn't understand it, and now I feel like I'm late to the party and like climbing back. But I love what you said about that, and I think that's the truest thing that could ever be spoken. But I'm going to grab some ice. I'm just wondering which one you're going to have me try next, the Wellner or the Elmer T. Lee. Did I say it? Elmer T. Lee.
Yeah, get us some ice. We'll try that one, I guess.
I got you. Yeah, that Elmer T. Lee is kind of calling to me. So did you bring some goodies here? I wanted to hear about, so you've played probably with a lot of different stuff with scope, and you've developed a few things yourself. And you spend a lot of time, I think, in the garage doing arts and crafts, which this guy respects that. So I guess the Dream Stroller is the one I'm familiar with, but I guess you'll have to educate me if I miss something.
No, I mean, that's...
You got any with you?
Yeah, I brought one pack with me
Cool.
just for you to play with or look at, but that's what...
You brought a grass piece, too.
Yeah, that was more for something else, but... So, that jig is like 2 years in the making, and I essentially was making a version of this on my own for the last year, almost year and a half. And then once I got let go from All Terrain, because, well,
You want to talk about that, or?
We went our separate ways for whatever reason, but like I had brought this jig up to them, but I wanted it done a special way, and because of it, it's expensive because of the hook that we use and the way I needed it made. It's not cheap. Like it's $9 for a 3-pack, so
That's a.
but it's done right. Like I really feel the best jig on the market, and it's got that O'Shaughnessy Gamakatsu hook in the 2-aught.
Yeah.
I've been running it for 2 years, and for a while I was pouring my own. I get them poured, or I pour them with the Do It mold in that hook, and I pour it in an 1/8 and then in a 1/4. And I ran them that way for a while and just loved it. Worked great, but then we got to the point where, like, in order to get your bait to dance the way it was supposed to, people were like, gotta tie a loop knot. And I don't trust a loop knot.
I don't either.
I hate them. Like, it's the only fluorocarbon knot I think is worse than that is a Palomar.
Really?
Yeah, like if you tie, you're ruining your whole setup if you tie a Palomar to a fluorocarbon.
Which knot do you tie?
I tie the double San Diego jam.
Sure.
So I was trying to figure out how we could get that to free dance without tying a loop knot. Fortunately, Ryugi makes split rings, and they make them down to an extremely tiny size, because the regular 90-degree 111 hook the eye just isn't that big. Like, you can't fit a regular split ring through it, so you have to find a tiny one. Fortunately, I did. So I was putting split rings in the eyelets and then tying to that. Even so, the only way to get it to, like, free float is if you kept the eyelet on, like, the little Z part of the split ring where it actually is only one wire wide. So you had to keep everything, like, right there, and then it would stay free.
Sure.
And I'm sure you know, but we've all been flipping that 4-aught Gamakatsu EWG ring hook with a craw tube for, 2 decades now. And I'm like, if I could find a way to weld a single wire through this, like, it wouldn't take up as much room and I'd get way more free motion.
Yeah, yeah.
So, like, that's kind of how it all came to be. Once I left All Terrain, my buddy Tim, who owns Tree Shaker, I've known him since like 2014. I was like, hey, I've got an idea. Do you want to build it? Like, it's not going to be cheap. And he jumped at the idea. So, like, this was 6 months in the making. We, like, had to play with the lead to make sure, like, it rolls over right. We kind of took a little inspiration on that from the owner, making sure it was, like, above the balance point so it rolls over well.
Sure.
And then
I love the indent.
And then we actually cut the eye off of that hook now, and that's a hook hanger.
Okay.
That we molded it in, so the ring has a lot more free floating action.
I was going to ask about that.
So we did that and got the welded ring, and, like, he was pouring them and, like, cutting up molds and, like, building it, and we finally got it good and sent it off to get done pretty in China. So, like, they're all poured up, and yeah, these showed up a week ago. We didn't order enough.
Sure.
So, like, Waypoint got them in right away, and they were sold out in 24 hours.
Yeah.
I know Omnia has some now. I'm not sure how long. I know the Hookup ordered a bunch. Not sure when they're going to show up on their website. I'm hoping to we get into their Sunday YouTube breakdown, because I think that'll push a lot of units. But once that kind of group's gone, we're going to have to wait a couple months, because we only made 2,000 packs of them, and they've gone pretty quick, and now we have to get more hooks. We got hooks set up. We bought every single hook in this O'Shaughnessy 111 that's essentially in the country, because they stopped making that hook now.
So are you offering, what sizes are you offering for hooks? Is just the 2-aught?
Just the 2-aught right now.
Yep.
I've got other sizes that are in the works that I've been using, but we started with the 2-aught because it's about perfect for anything from, like, 3.5 to 5 inches.
Yep.
Which is what 90% of what people are doing. And we go from 1/8 ounce, 3/16, quarter, and 3/8.
Beautiful.
So essentially everything you need. I tend to not go past 3/8. Once you get to a half, I feel like it kills your action. Like, it's just too much weight down there for the most part.
Sure.
And yeah, I got plans for, like, a 16th or a 3/32 that we're playing with right now, but I didn't think it was as necessary right now, because there's not a lot of people running that super light stuff yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's coming, though. What if I wanted to order 1,000?
1,000?
Yep.
Well, it's going to be
Would
a
you
couple
sell them?
months.
Yep.
They, like I said, we got 10,000 hooks. The last 10,000 Gamakatsu had in the 2-aught before they quit building them. They are coming out. They're essentially revamping this hook. It's going to come out by the end of the year, essentially the same, but with their new tournament nano coating grade stuff. So,
Cool.
So essentially that's what we're going to transition into, most likely.
Yep.
Like, obviously I'll have to play with it a little bit, make sure it didn't change anything, but
Sure.
It'll probably be great, and we'll just keep rolling. But so yeah, we'll have, in the next couple of months, we should have a bunch more packs showing up. Tackle Warehouse did put a big order in a couple days ago for the next shipment, so they're getting 2/3 of them, but there will be others around.
Well, we'll talk after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to have to figure it out, but
Cool,
yeah,
man. That's exciting.
So yeah, the stores are buying them, which it's exciting, but we need to get them to more.
As anglers, we develop special bonds with our equipment. There's something magical when you find that perfect jig rod and reel combo for a technique that elevates your confidence on the water. Whether it's a perfectly balanced, crisp, and sensitive jig rod that gives you the highest level of control over your bait, allows you to feel every grain of sand, every bite, and allows you to drive that hook clean, or a rod with the perfect action and taper that seems to keep your chatterbait, swim bait, or whatever it is in the back of the bass's head where it belongs no matter where you throw it, or a rod that allows you to effortlessly cast a lighter bait you used to cuss at on your old combo. These types of magical bonds are rare to find in a mass-produced sweatshop, which is why Veselka Fishing and Customs came to existence, with the sole purpose of bringing you closer to your passion by enhancing the bond with you, your rod, and the bass. Confidence is everything in bass fishing, and there's no bigger boner buster than losing a big fish, not feeling like you can present your bait correctly. The list goes on and on. Mr. Veselka is a full-blown artesian craftsman who can build you the perfect rod, no matter the size or action, custom, exactly the way you want it. He also has a wide variety to choose from right on his website, including fan favorites like the 8-foot hair jig rod, the drop shot rod, swim bait rod, the chatter chicken rod, the MH workhorse, and more. Even ice fishing. You do the whole frozen Swiss cheese thing, the ice fishing. Seen grumpy old men? Well, you can send that jiggle stick back to the antique store because Mr. Veselka builds custom ice rods in all sizes and actions too. So head on over to his website, veselkafishing.com. That's VOCELKA fishing.com to enhance your confidence on the water, feel your passion, and catch more bass, baby.
Anglers' hands. Like I've put them into elite anglers' hands. Like I've gave them to guys who like do this a lot, and they're really impressed with them. But until
it's coming, bud.
Until a bunch of people start using them every day, I really think it's the best strolling jig made. I think if you're the next best one is probably the Horizon Head, that EWG.
Mm-hmm. You ever use a Koikaten? Varivus Koikaten? That and the Horizon Head are the two best ones I've found, but I love this hook, and I think it's something to be really proud of, dude.
Yeah.
My question is the minnows. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, it's fine.
Do you find, like, there's certain minnows that have an easier, more responsive action, right? And then there's minnows that it seems like you have to work a lot harder to get that action, I guess. Do you feel like, let's take a lure that doesn't have a lot of roll action.
Yeah.
Do you feel like this completely changes completely how that lure acts in the water?
It makes it a lot easier. It kind of dummy proofs it.
Sure.
So like you don't have to be Kyoyo Fujita to get like it to roll perfectly when it's out of vision and out of sight. Like most people, you need to have a certain amount of line out to get it to get it to like get the right action. And it seems like you need more line out depending the heavier it is to get the correct action.
Yep, I would agree.
But like this makes it as easy as it's going to make it for any bait for somebody to pick it up and get the correct action. The really important thing really is to be consistent with like the strength and speed of like your pops or the way you're working it. Like you can run it faster, slower, and get it to like shorter or like more, but you just have to, it's just like almost like just keep a beat with it.
Sure.
And if you can keep that beat, no matter how fast you want it to go, like it'll correct itself after a moment or two, and it'll get going, and it just runs the way it's supposed to run. And
Do you have like a 3-beat playlist that you roll with, like Biggie? More of a slow
I don't really
shake,
think about it like that anymore.
Then you got Tupac, hit 'em up. I don't know. No,
I don't. And then it was just.
You're a father now. Rap is really past your prime on the rap, I suppose. Or you still listen to the rap?
I listen to everything.
Cool, man. Do you have like a favorite like genre? I'm all over the board too. I'm crazy when it comes to that shit.
Not really. It's pretty eclectic mix from rap to oldies to like southern rock to whatever. Like
You're just like me.
I just like Pandora thumbs up playlist, and it just like random shit comes on, and I'm like, all right. And if I'm not feeling it, just fast forward that one. But
if you had to say you had one favorite artist like of all time that you think is the best,
I can't think of one of the all time.
How about a book series? Hey, dude, I'm a fan.
Come on,
I'm a fan, bro. I'm just wondering, is your favorite book? Is the best book in your mind the same as the best movie of the movie series for Harry Potter?
No.
For those of you who don't know, they're different. Okay, what's the best book in the Harry Potter series in your mind?
Oh! I thought you were saying, are the movies the best and the book? No, I'm not a big fan of the movies.
That's because you read the books.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I am kind of a big fan of HBO. Apparently, is coming out with this new series, and they're gonna spend an entire season on each book, so they'll be able to draw it out a lot more, and hopefully they can like include a lot more of the like little tidbits that like really made it great that were glossed over in the movies. Because smashing 800 pages into 2.5 hours is not possible without just like a brief summation of what's going on.
Yeah, for you lazy fucks that watch the movies and were too lazy to read the books, Hermione gives Harry Potter a hand job in the books.
Listen, you can just listen to the audiobooks too. I've done that a dozen times driving.
That's a good play.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have that luxury as kids, but that's a great play.
No.
That's a great play. I mean, the movies they can never pack that in, right? Just like if you did a quick interview, you can never really pack in like the true benefits of the dream stroller. So right now you can get them at a few places, and there's going to be more coming.
Yeah. Right now, I think the only place that has any in stock is Omnia. I haven't looked in the last day or two. I know. Like, they had some left. And I know whenever they show up at Hookup, there'll be a bunch there.
Oh, yeah. It's a good spot.
So everybody needs to go out and buy like 5 packs of everything. So
dude, these are going to be sold
dollars.
fast, dude.
I got a baby I got to put into daycare here soon when I hit the road. So need every dollar I can get.
If you want Austin, Felix's kid, to not be malnourished, I highly recommend purchasing the Dream Stroller.
Yeah.
And you can catch some more bass, dude. But I just have one question. Where is platform 9 3/4? Where is it? England?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's painted on the wall at Champlain, though, too.
Really?
Lake Champlain in Plattsburgh. If you drive through town, you'll see it.
Platform 9 3/4?
Yeah. It's on a white brick wall, like about 3 blocks from takeoff.
Did you try running into it?
I didn't.
That's what I would.
I've usually been pretty busy whenever I've got to Champlain, so I've had the opportunity.
I can't remember. Like, could you have thrown something through it to check, make sure first? Like, throw a rock through it, and then like, all right, I'll run.
I don't think so.
Do you think there's?
You couldn't.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
No. Well, do you think there's parallels with like, what do you think that was representing? Do you think that could be real? Like, do you think you could actually portal into a different universe?
I have no idea.
I don't either. I've got more questions than answers.
I wish I could take some of the stuff from the books into real life, because it'd make cheating in bass tournaments very easy. You'd win everything.
What would you bring from Harry Potter to real life?
Like
If
a
you could-
time turner, if you could just spin it and all of a sudden I got another hour, or I went back an hour.
Oh yeah. I was thinking like invisibility cloak. I could do some gangster shit with an invisibility cloak, but I never thought about time. Like
Oh no,
that
I'm
one
talking
is
about like tournament wise. Like what are you gonna do with invisibility?
nothing in a tournament.
Oh
I
no,
didn't
I'm
think
talking
about it
about
that
just
way.
fishing in general. Like,
Yeah, dude. Time turner?
yeah, like
Yeah, they're
I
fucked.
need 2 more hours, or like you dump you dump an 8-pounder off a bed. You're like, shit, freaking flip her back 15 minutes. Let's try this again.
Right. Okay, so let's say you're on Okeechobee on a flat and you could use one spell on another angler. Which one would you pick?
On an angler, I feel like it'd be much easier just to do spells on the fish to like.
I only know one spell. Wingardium Leviosa.
You could do that and just make a whole bunch of fish like levitate out of the water and just drive by.
That'd be
and, like,
my
pick
thoughts.
The good ones.
Yeah. Wingardium
Like-
Leviosa.
Where was it? Asio is where like they make something come to you, so you'd be like,
Okay.
bam, like there's one on a bed, just like shoot at him, freaking all of a sudden he's in the boat.
That'd be cool.
Yeah, it's just like there's not any rules against it currently in bass, so
To be honest, there isn't.
Yeah.
So, like, but you gotta have the right wand.
mm,
And the right, I guess, don't you have to have the right genetics too, and birthright? And
I
birth
mean you'd have to
path,
be a
like-
wizard.
All right,
Yeah.
you're a wizard, Harry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I feel like
Do you like Lord of the Rings too?
I mean so that's the opposite because I like the movies but I've never read the books, and
I'm with you on
So-
that.
like I couldn't tell you any of their names. Like that shit just confuses me.
I only remember Legolas.
Oh, there you go. But
See, my mom read me the books when I was really young, the Harry Potter ones.
Mhm.
So I got, and then I read them. So I read those books before the movies. Lord of the Rings, just movies. Never read them things. Those books were long and looked really just. Yeah, you're pissed about the Harry Potter movies. I can't imagine the Lord of the Rings readers. Although
Yeah,
those
I
are
don't
long
know.
movies.
at the same time, like, so what's his face? It seems like a lot of the people who are huge fans are fans of the movie. I think. Like,
Oh, for Lord of the Rings?
who does the Tonight Show now? He used to be on like.
Oh, Jimmy Fallon?
No, he used to be on
Oh.
right after Daily Show.
Oh,
Colbert.
Colbert?
Report.
Yep.
So like Stephen Colbert is apparently like one of the biggest Lord of the Rings nerds on like planet Earth. And like,
Really?
every once in a while, like somebody will come on and be like, "Oh, I know a lot," so he like just like drops knowledge on him. And apparently, he helped out with the movies or something, like as far as like how things went to make them more realistic. And he seems to enjoy the movie still. I'm like, if this guy who like loves these books still loves it, fine.
Right.
I feel like we're gotten way off topic, and this is
That's part of the galaxy, dude.
Everybody tuned out.
Hey, bro. No, you'd be surprised. Average listener time is the entire episode. And we've been more on topic than a lot of episodes I do, which has been cool.
Like Willie's.
Willie's was, I learned nothing about bass fishing.
Well,
But here's the deal, man. Like, you're Austin Felix. He's Willie. Like, it is what it is. You should be yourself. Like, that's what I want to broadcast, like us, you know? So we're going to get off topic. We're going to stay on topic. We're going to talk about whatever the hell you want to talk
me
about.
and Willie had the most fun ever fishing like NABC tournaments,
Yeah.
but you got to keep the man focused.
How the
So
fuck
like
do you do
in
that?
practice, it was like we had one setup. We're like, I'm gonna go try to figure shit out, and like I would send him and I'd tell him to go fish every dock on the lake. Like that is your goal. I want you to make a cast under every dock of the lake for every tournament, and like mark the ones where there's a good fish on it. And so like that usually would keep him focused for like at least half of practice, and like after that, sometimes he's there's giants under this one, and like no, it wasn't shit. But like he did, there were times where like he cashed us checks because of it.
Oh yeah, I
And,
believe it.
But it was just, it was always just a blast. But that was the best I'd figured out how to keep him on task.
Did you get him to practice all day? Because I've never seen him practice all day. Yeah, I'm calling you out, Willie. I've never seen him practice all day.
For the most part.
He's always at the bar by 1.
Yeah, but he'll get
a lot
he'll
done.
get plenty done. And what he doesn't get done, he doesn't. But, like, at least he's productive when he's out there. At least I know what he's doing. I'm like, I can keep track of him.
I found him one day in practice just sleeping on his boat. Just out in the middle of the lake, just sleeping. It's like noon. He's sunburnt as hell. Doesn't care. I gotta pee. Now I really have to pee. I'm curious about the minnows you like to shake, because obviously you really refined this jig head deal, and to me, people overlook the importance of a jig head, a hook, and I guess what I appreciate about anglers like you, and I feel like I'm a similar way, is the appreciation for those things, and like the constant like search for that little bit better scenario, that little better tool. But like when it comes to minnows, we're seeing the full colonization of a soft plastic elastomer variation of minnows, and I guess it's a little daunting. So how do you navigate that world, and how do you develop a simplified process in which minnows you like?
For minnows, I keep it relatively simple. A lot of the ones everybody throws, Sakamata shads, obviously. Scented jerk shads we've been using for years now. They still work absolutely great. The new Crush City stuff with the mooch minnow, that kind of deal. Those are really good baits. Brad was nice enough to give me a few packs that I got to use last year before they got out, and they catch bass.
They do. Do you reel that thing or shake them? Because I found I reel that thing and catch them better than shaking.
I fish it the same way you fish.
Sure.
We shake the minnow. Waypoint has a video of it in the tank.
I seen that.
The action looks pretty good, but you got to understand the tank is this wide and about this deep, so you can only get, and they got a little ice fishing pole, so it's really hard to get it. You can't get her really running good.
A Ned rig you can film damn good in that tank, right? A Ned rig you can film great in that tank. Shaking a minnow with 3 feet of freaking line is like trying to freaking fish a glide bait with that much, and trying to make it do what it needs to do. So
what's your setup for throwing it?
See,
your rod and stuff.
I've gone softer and softer for the tip in terms of shaking it, and it's just making sure I have the backbone for it. So like I work with Dane. Dane's like brother of mine. So he makes custom rods. So I've really, I don't have this deal perfected. Easton Fothergill's a friend of mine. I fished with you that day, and I know a little bit. So I guess for me, it's something that I can shake and keep that rod with the slack really good, and then hit them when I need to. But it seems
what
like when
length rod are you throwing?
I like a 6.8 to 6.10 for the spinning pole is what I've liked the best so far. But I'm more curious what you like, dude, because I think you've spent a lot more time doing it than me, and I think there's a lot of evolution to come. I remember a video you did talking about doing it on a bait caster, and that's something that I guess for me, I got some things that I won't mention that. See, the universe works in mysterious ways,
You weren't
and
supposed to tell anybody that.
table's not level. I'm just wondering which spell you
Threw the universe out of alignment.
Well, the universe thought I was going to give up what I was going to say, but I'm not. But I'm curious what you like to shake with and what you found.
My evolution of rods has gone from soft and longer to stiffer and shorter.
Sure.
Now, if I'm throwing the Dream Stroller, I do it on the rod. The Aris rod is called the Super Adapter. It's a 610 medium light, but it's pretty stiff. Like Aris rods in general are about a half weight heavier than you say. So
Sure.
medium lights bordering on medium.
Sure.
I just found that this is a single hook.
Yep.
And throwing a spinning rod, a lot of people, when they start doing this, they get bit and they do the reel into them firm, and like you got them almost like a swim bait.
That's what
like
I
old
kinda
school.
do. Yeah.
And you lose a lot of fish that way, because
Okay.
even like you're going to have to go really light wire with this single wire if you're going to just reel into them. It requires a snap.
Really? Okay. I'm listening.
So
I'm listening, dude.
So like a stiffer rod, a shorter rod tends to be a lot more responsive, so you can keep your beat when you're up there, and you can make it faster. The longer it gets, like the sloppier you get. So I like to actually run this bait on that rod. It's a little stiffer. I have my drag set a little tighter, and when you finally like, it's you still like you check the fish, but once you know you have a bait, there's a definite like you want to pop him to make sure you bury this hook. And I'll leave the drag a little tighter. The nice thing about it is, that was the other reason with this ring hook, is a lot of times back before we were developing this, I would have to go heavier pound line, because otherwise occasionally the pressure you needed to exert to like bury this thing, so like they're hooked, they're not going anywhere, will occasionally pop your line. So we got this ring hook, you can tie that double San Diego jam, and now your 8-pound leader is actually 8 pounds. You tie a Palomar knot onto 8-pound leader, and it's probably 6.5 pounds. Like, it just breaks a lot faster.
Sure. Do you feel that means you have to just retie more often, or you'll break on a fresh one with polymer?
As fresh as it is, you're not getting 100% of
That
the
makes
pound
sense.
test.
Yep.
Like,
That makes sense.
It's been proven over and over. You can look at 10 different random YouTube videos, like, or you can just,
I won't argue with you.
or you
there.
can just tie them yourself on something you can break with your hands and just slowly pull. And like, I've showed buddies this. I've got both Brian New and Brian Schmidt. Between them have won way more tournaments than I have. They both were Palomar tires, and like, I've got them both to throw that knot out of the way just
You're
by
getting me there.
just by doing it. Like,
So my question is, so like what I noticed with the stiffer rods I used in the 6'10", 7-foot range, is I felt like I was overworking my minnow. It was too easy for me to overwork my minnow, and I guess I got the rod that I've found the best hookup ratio on, and I got it right over here. But I'm curious. I mean, that's the one I've found the best for, I guess, presenting the bait correctly to get bit. But I'm not, like, my biggest issue is I have a hard time feeling the bites. But I feel like my hookup ratio, this is the best that I've found for shaking anything up to 3/16 of an ounce. And it probably, based on what you're telling me, it seems way lighter than what you're using.
it is way lighter than what I use, and way softer.
And I'm just curious, but
One thing that you have done that we haven't keyed on yet that I notice is the line you have tied on that.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference.
I think I'd love to dig into that, because I've definitely noticed a difference.
So that's the Allmight Saking braid.
Yes.
Like
You got some here, right?
Yeah, I brought it just.
You keep talking. I'm actually going to show that dream stroller close to the camera just because we've been talking about it, and let people see that, and then I'll show this Allmight too, but keep talking.
So that Allmight line, it's way thinner than your normal line. I still throw some regular Power Pro in 8 and 10. And that 13-pound Allmight is substantially thinner than even 8-pound Power Pro. And what what a lot of people probably know at this point is that Allmight line is a sinking braid. And for a lot of things, that's not necessary. But for minnow fishing, it really makes things a lot easier, to the point where if you throw the same minnow on the same rod with a floating braid and then throw it on that Allmight, you'll almost feel like you have to back your drag off more with that Allmight because you don't have that bend in your line from the floating braid. So it just feels like if you have your drag set the exact same with that braid and say Power Pro, whatever your regular floating braid you like, it'll feel like your drag is substantially tighter with that, even though it's not. So you're still putting the same amount of pressure on your hook, but your penetration's going to be better because like more of the force you're putting into that hook set is going into the tip of the hook as opposed to taking up all that bow in the line.
That to me is something that I think is something that your average angler overlooks big time. And I think about when I started using straight fluorocarbon versus braid on a few techniques, I felt like that line bow made a difference. But with when you're talking about strolling something through the water column, I guess describe that bow. Like a braid, normal braid is going to bow like this, kind of to like this, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's getting pulled down by the bait, so everything is going to be bowed towards the bait all the way down. This, it still happens, obviously, because your momentum's a lot faster at the bait, but it stays straighter. And even when you're working your bait back, it's still... you're like a floating braid won't straighten out, so you're running straight at the bait. This will straighten out because it continues to sink until it's in line with the bait. So when you're running it, everything's dead in line. So when you set the hook on a fish, there's none of that bow to take up anymore.
Yep.
Like I wouldn't suggest throwing this on like a shaky head.
Yeah.
Wouldn't suggest throwing this on like a wacky Cinco, because once you lay it on the bottom, it's all just going to lay down on the bottom. And then as you work it, you're going to have the opposite effect. It's going to be going from the bottom over, and you're going to be essentially scooting your bait along the bottom instead of getting it to lift at all.
And abrasion resistance is not the idea with that line.
No, not really, but like they got 22-pound test that's probably the same diameter like the normal like 10-pound test. So
yeah.
Like it's really strong. I find it's more useful the lighter you go on your minnows. So I throw this 13-pound when I get to like an 1/8 ounce or less.
Sure.
So you can still get the bait out there.
If we're talking Power Pro, that seems like on the right. And what I found with Allmight is you have to go like a step heavier, like to get the
at least
okay,
like
yeah.
13-pound Allmight will cast 20% power, 20% further than 8-pound Power Pro.
And that I think is the important thing to note. Like your standard buyer, when they're looking at this Allmight line, you're not looking at Power Pro.
But the other thing is like 13-pound, this is my personal, and I played with it down to like, I don't know if you've played with like the 11 and the 9
I have.
And the 7. Like I would not go less than 13.
I would not either.
Like I played with the 11 and the 9,
broke it, I bet.
and it's like
I broke it.
It's just too hard to use.
I broke it.
Yeah, it's like spider silk. It's so thin. It's just
casts good, but
it can
fucking breaks.
Yeah, it'll like it's hard to get it. Like I don't know if it just you'd have to put 40 wraps on a FG knot just to get it to freaking grab or something.
That was the issue I had. Is my leaders weren't holding on anything less than that. So, and it's probably because I wasn't doing enough wraps, or I don't know, but I guess it's damn good line. Just know that 13 pounds kind of your minimum, and then what's kind of your maximum?
I run like 90% of the time I'm running 13, 15 for a spinning rod. That's basically all I need. So when I'm, like you were discussing, when I go to a bait caster, if I go to like a BFS rod or like a BFS reel, I run that 22.
Sure. Sure.
when I'm shaking a normal minnow, and I'll run 2 different setups in the bait caster too, because I'll have like
I'm excited about
a
this.
7-foot medium light
bait caster.
bait caster it's still a fast action, so you can assume it's similar, but it's so much you can get away with a little bit extra length, because at least for me, it's so much easier for me to be consistent just the way I hold a bait caster, to like make a consistent like thump, so I'm like getting the right bait.
Teal's Bass Galaxy is now offering intergalactic merchandise. That's right. We got apparel now, baby. Check out our website. We got a variety of apparel, hats, bucket hats, sweatshirts, t-shirts, all the finest goods. So stop on our website, tealsbassgalaxy.com, click on the apparel tab, and start looking good, baby.
And then obviously the hook set, you're getting way more power, and like it's way easier to drive a bait.
Yeah.
So once you move to a bait caster, you can do more of the reel into it deal.
Sure.
Because you're not getting as much slip. You're obviously still going to have to let your drag slip, or you're just going to break everything. But so I run that. I run that BFS setup if I want to run that like a 4 or 5 inch bait with the Dream stroller. I'll run that same jig head. And then if I get into bigger baits, 6, 7 inch baits, I run a 7.3. It's a medium heavy moderate, and then I run a 30-pound SX2, just regular braid, because I'm throwing a bigger bait and everything works a lot faster.
So you won't go to straight. Are you still using a BFS on that setup, or are you going to a standard size?
I just run that. I've got it on one of those Shimano Corrado 70s.
Yep,
like,
I've got one of those.
So it's still small and nice and compact in your hand, and it doesn't require a lot of spool because you're running braid to fluoro.
Right.
But you're also, when I get to that stuff, I'm running like 12, 14-pound leader.
Sure, yeah. Versus your spinning rod, what size are you running for a leader?
Anywhere from 7 to 12.
Sure.
It really depends on water clarity, fish, like how.
That 16th ounce size fish is a lot better on, like, that to me is where you really need to be caught. Like, yeah, dude, those really light baits are so much more line particular, obviously. And that's...
that's when the ring becomes so important, because that's when you start breaking it on hook sets. When you get to that super light stuff, you can't put the pressure on them necessary to drive that hook home.
Sure.
Without breaking occasionally.
Yeah.
So now with that ringed hook, like you can tie your double San Diego jam and you can pull on them more. Like you're getting... Sure. It's the deal. You just got to get some. I'll leave that one with you, but...
I love that. Dude, this is cool, man, and I guess you're going to sell the shit out of these because no one makes anything like this. And I guess I'm a guy who's just a nut about jigs, and whether it's a flipping jig, a finesse jig, whatever, like I'm particular as hell. And the O'Shaughnessy hook, I think, is an underappreciated bastard when it comes to fishing. And you got the right hook, and you've developed something that's truly innovative and something to be proud of, dude. And I think you're going to sell the absolute shit out of these. And I think we'll help out a little bit here today, just because we letting the people know you have them and where they, like, the big thing is I don't know if you'll be able to make enough. This is that cool of a bait, dude. And I guess is this kind of like, is this something that you're the most proud of like stuff you built? Because I know you've been you pour all the time.
Yeah, that's been my baby for like legitimately 2 years. I've been making that jig, and that hook has been my baby for 8 years. Like,
yeah,
when I first got into the FLW and stuff like that, I was pouring that same hook on like a Ned head for like Magnum for like the 4.5 inch TRDs and stuff. And I was running that because it's just the like I think it's the nastiest freaking spinning rod hook that still has a little beef to it.
Yes, dude.
But it's thin enough that you can bury it every time. Like a lot of those Ned heads, a lot of that stuff, like the hooks just get too thick too fast, and like you can't bury them.
I don't disagree. And it seems like like too thin and you're bending it. And there's something special about this. I'll tell you right now. 1, 2, just not the same type of fishing, but on that goby tube head. I mean, the Bite Me goby tube head for
the heavyweight one.
Yeah, that 3/8 and ½ ounce.
So that's the exact same head, except it's a 60-degree, not a 90-degree eye.
Yeah, but that bend in the hook is similar, and I guess
it's still that 111.
I guess what I'm saying is I've grown fond of that hook, I guess, and I think it's an underappreciated bastard. So I'm glad what I like about this podcast is there's not time limits, so we can truly kind of get in the weeds on some of that stuff and kind of get to the depths of the ocean on, like, you spent obviously a lot of time with this. And to me, is that a spot weld on the ring? Just a spot welder or what?
Yeah, as far as I know. I mean,
because them single rings to me is the play. And I guess you haven't broke any? I feel like it seems strong as hell, and we're talking spinning rod stuff.
Yeah,
so
we're not putting that much pressure. You got what, at most, a 12-pound test leader? Like, I've never broke one. Like, even when I was using that size 0 Ryugi, I've never straightened out like the split ring on them. It's like you're gonna break your line before you're gonna break that ring.
Sure.
Or like any part of that hook in general.
I want to pick your brain on the BFS stuff a little bit because I want to get into it, right? But I don't. It's a little different and intimidating, but to me it seems like there's a place for it.
I'm not by any means a master of it. Like, my first delve into it or of purchasing any BFS stuff was just purchasing a BFS reel specifically because I wanted to try to like do this with a bait caster, and I thought that would be the best play. When I did it, I got a Daiwa Tatula BFS reel.
If you need to get that, feel free.
In hindsight, I wish I would have got the Shimano.
Sure. Then.
And for one reason only, when you're going braid to fluoro leader, if you're tying an FG knot, that T-wing system likes to grab your FG knot.
I was thinking it.
And obviously Shimano just has a regular line winder, whatever you. It doesn't have that T-wing, so like
regular
you never
Paul.
have. Yeah, so you never have to deal with it. Like, it comes in and out of the reel perfectly every time. Whereas every once in a while you'll be like,
right, the T-wing.
So like I don't have a reel sponsor. I run a bunch of Daiwas and I run a bunch of Shimanos for like different things. So, and like Shimano makes a really good reel, but for braid to fluoro, if you're reeling an FG knot into your reel, like, I would stay away from the Daiwa T-wing.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, and I've found that even just with, like, Dane makes a hair rod, and like there's a lot of whip to that rod. It's 8 feet long, and you almost need that leader past your stripper guide. Just on the off chance of 1 in 100 casts, that leader runs in the stripper guide and ruins your day, whipping that thing around. So I can relate with that. I hate that FG knot. It's hard to tie.
It's the only knot to tie at this point, though.
I understand.
You have to tie that knot, really.
The problem with I love straight fluoro on a bait caster, but a BFS seems like that spool's going to be just way too shallow to pull that off.
I mean, it depends what pound test. Obviously, you can go lighter when you go straight fluorocarbon because you get so much more stretch.
Sure.
So it's going to be way more forgiving. I started doing this with straight fluorocarbon, but I liked the response and the added sensitivity of braid, so like I moved away from it. Like, all of this happened. My first delve into a bait caster for a minnow bait was Lake Fork last year.
Sure.
And when everybody was catching 130 pounds and I got my teeth kicked in, like that, the 2 days of the tournament, I hooked 6 fish over 6 pounds and only put 1 in the boat, and it was like 7 1/4.
Using straight fluoro, or
Well, I had an evolution because I started out with a spinning rod and just like I was throwing a 6-inch Sakamata and I was throwing a horizon head. I'm just like, it's just not big enough for these big fish, and like I couldn't handle them. So like I caught one but lost 2 the first day. So day 2 I rigged up a bait caster with straight fluorocarbon and a bait caster with braid to fluoro, and like played with those like in the tournament. Like first fish catch, it didn't have anything to do with it, with my setup at that point. But my first catch in the morning, 20 minutes in, was like an 8.5. It comes up and like tail walks the whole side of the boat and dives under and wraps around the skag and cuts me off on the stag motor.
Oh,
just
fuck.
like, so it's just like, but playing with it that day, it was just like I had both set up, and I just really liked the braid to fluoro better.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess so that size shaken rod seems stiffer than mine. How long is that Arius that spinning rod you're shaking with?
It's 6'10", I believe, 6'9" or 6'10".
Sure. And do you feel like you have to be very prudent about how you're shaking, or you overwork with it? Like, to me, maybe it's because I'm just not like, I'm naturally overworking it, you know?
Maybe. Yeah, I don't feel like I overwork it. I feel like when I get to a rod like you're running, it gets spongy. So like I'm popping, but it's not doing anything.
Okay.
I feel like the opposite is happening.
Really?
A lot of times. It's kind of like if you run too soft of a jerk bait pole, like you'll hit it twice and that bait just like isn't doing much. Now, if it's really cold, that can be the right deal because it's just doing less, but like it's not responsive enough to like get that harsh dart. Like I feel like a lot of times I was getting that with a softer rod because I started with a 7.6, just like, oh, longer's got to be better, when I was like trying to figure this out, and I'm like, oh, it just didn't work. Like you could not keep it going, couldn't feel anything, it just got too long. So I switched to a 7.2 medium light, which the 6.10 medium light's substantially stiffer than the 7.2 medium light in the Aris. The 7.2 is a depth watcher. I will still run that if I'm running like a 16th ounce when I drop down to like smaller baits and stuff. But yeah, it seems like the perfect rod, to the point where 3 years ago I thought that rod wasn't really useful to me.
Sure.
So I'm like, why do I need a 6'10" spinning rod? Everything should be at least 7 foot long for dragon. There's no need to be that short. And it's pretty stiff all the way to the tip. Like it just doesn't feel like it has a spot in my arsenal. So like I had one just because I got one in my initial like order a few years ago. I'm like, oh, got to get one of everything to see what it's like. But then I like started using it for this, and I'm like, oh no, this is the rod for it, to the point where now I have like 6 of that same rod.
Sure.
And it's become a lot more. It's become one of the 2 or 3 rods I use the most.
God damn it. I wish we could like go down to my dock right now and I could shake yours and then shake mine and fucking, because what I felt like was happening is, you know how like there's that magic with slack line and working unpegged craw tube on the bottom on fluorocarbon. Like that's something I learned with shake and slack, and I just felt like there was something with the rod and the slack dance making the jig head do what it needed to do. But it's also, you know, I think the biggest issue I had with the stiff rods is I was losing fish. And the lighter rod I went with, the more fish I landed. Like to a obviously extent, but it seemed that's what it was for me. But everybody's different. But I look up to you, man. So
the other thing about it is like, so when you think about the stiffness of your rod, the further away the bait is from you, the less input is getting sent all the way to the bait. So so if you're looking at your jig minnow 2 feet off the side of the boat and you're like, okay, it runs great like that, you're not getting near the same input.
I can't
when
make
he's
any
50
fucking
feet.
bait look good 2 feet from the boat shaking it.
So
I'm with you, dude.
But so it's like, so you need a little bit more, I think, as far as losing fish, I was the opposite. I
Sure.
was at the kind of reel into them, and to the point where I'm like, I'm just not burying it. Like the ones I would get in the boat would be like just past the barb, and I'm just like, they're not getting it. So like, only thing I can do is bump up my leader a little bit and crank down my drag a little bit and give it to them a little harder, and then just back it off.
The
once
only
I set
thing
the
I
hook.
can think of is I'm a snare set guy, like, but you were talking about length of rod, right? Me in stature on a pull, I'm a fucking 7'8" rod, like based on my wings. I'm a tall, lanky bastard, right? So my hook set isn't short. It's like from here to here, and all I can think of is the length of my hook set is probably why I'm losing fish on that stiffer rod.
Yeah, I don't have. Yeah.
Versus if I had a snap,
like, if
I'm
got-
snapping setting that thicker rod, I'm maybe catching those fish. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like a little, tighten your drag down a little more, and it's kind of like you're shaking it, and like, does the fish have it? And you almost like stop, and like you have to check because you never feel them eat it really.
That's
Like that. Maybe a lot of people don't realize it, but like when they eat it, it's not a shaky head. It's not a doink.
No,
You're never hearing that. It's almost just
not
like
a tube bite.
It's just like you're shaking it, and all of a sudden, like there's more pressure, and it's almost like and you can see your rod, and you're like, okay, but like once you get to there, it's almost just like a.
And see, that's I think the difference between why I'm not like, because for me, I am setting like a swim bait, but it's a long, hard set. So that stiffer rod, that faster rod, doesn't yield to that set. To your point.
That's the way I've
Austin.
gotten to it. And as soon as like you give them that, like I'm at the point where like I know it's buried, and then it's like crank your drag, loosen your drag like a third of a turn. So now you can just run, and just at that point it's smallmouth fishing, just like eventually jumps, runs around, like wait until you're done and then scoop them. Like it's all over. Just like don't put too much pressure on them now that you're going to let them like wear the hook out and pull it free.
Dude, you know what I think shaking a minnow could bring back that could actually make it like cooler than they're trying to make it down to be? Bring the pistol grip back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like the perfect, like on a BFS or like a bait caster, a little pistol grip, shaken. Like I want Dane. That's what I told Dane for 2025. We're bringing the pistol grip back.
I might still have one of those in the
Really?
basement.
Oh my god,
But-
dude! Like tell me another technique that could bring the pistol. Like to me, that's the perfect pistol gripping technique. Besides a little spinner, little 3/8 spinner buggy build dancing it.
Yeah, it's just your wrists are so weak though, and you set the hook, it's just like.
But
Like-
you're just snapping, Austin. You're just snapping. It's look at that O'Shaughnessy. It ain't that thick.
No,
you're just giving a
I would-
little pop.
And it would probably work.
Like- That'd be nice in a man's hand.
Yeah. It could be. I don't know. It's like
Awesome
balance.
Felix signature series Glock 9.
It's balance.
Pistol grip.
Like the balance of it is more important than anything. So like having a little bit, so like your balance point is right there over the reel. Like I'm afraid if you get to a pistol grip, your balance point is going to be way in front of the reel, and it's going to make the tip feel a lot heavier.
Let's see where you get your rich mahogany and you counterweight.
Yeah,
that.
you could do that, or like put a couple quarters back there. Like you remember
couple of
those old
quarters.
black like slides that used to go on the back of reels, and then you
Yeah.
shove lead in the back. Like you
Yeah.
could do something like that. But do you have room on a pistol grip to put that extra stuff on there?
Well, depends. Depends how big a magazine you want to put in that.
Like it could work.
It could work. That I feel like in Japan they might be doing like. There's more pistol grips in Japan than America right now.
Yeah, they got fancy like molded, like
Yeah.
whittled out of mahogany, and they're like. You have to buy your reel left to right, or your rod left to right handed
Yeah.
to make it fit right.
And to me, that's a beautiful thing. Are we gonna move over to the next one? I'll be honest, that Elmer J. Lee was some of the better shit I've ever tasted.
Oh, it's good.
Damn good. It went down way too easy for me. I'm just wondering if the Wellers.
You want a Weller's?
I
will have a Weller's.
I want a Wellers. You do you, buddy. That's perfect. All right. Yep.
What?
Deal.
Finish off. What else are we going to talk about now?
Bro, the world is, I want to get your opinion on Japan because you've been with Ryugi a while, and I guess me, myself, and I have a special appreciation for the JDM thing. I've kind of been into it for years, and I guess I'm flying to Japan end of this month. I'm going to the Osaka show, and I'm pretty excited. And I guess, like, I just have an appreciation for those guys, and I feel like you've gotten to know some guys on tour and have a special connection kind of with the JDM stuff just as a passionate guy, passionate angler. And I guess to me, that's something I think we could, I relate with you on that, and I'd love to hear kind of some of your perspectives. And
I mean,
it's a new world, man.
For one reason or another, Taku sort of gravitated to me, and we are really good friends. I don't know really how it happened.
Cool.
Except that we both were just like next to each other, and it became a thing. So like I chat with him every once in a while. He got me on with Ryugi.
Really?
Since then, I've actually become really good friends with Kenta too, who's with Ryugi, and is totally awesome.
That is so awesome, dude. That's so cool.
I get a lot, like I'm always trying to tinker with stuff and find new baits, and I get a lot of new stuff from them, or when something new comes out, they'll like kind of tell me about it. Like I feel I'm not actually sworn to secrecy, but like right now I don't feel like anything they've told me I should probably just like blurt out on the podcast.
I understand.
Because there's like new stuff in Japan that it maybe work. Like some of it's really wild. I'm like, I don't know if that's the deal, but I didn't think fuzzy dice or koikis would be a thing either. And
they are.
They have a place. They're not the new Senko, but they're
at times
they can catch them. I've caught fish on them when they will not bite anything else. But at the same time, it's not like every fish eats it either.
No, I've found there's special windows where it feels like you're cheating with it. And that's about it.
And I think you've thrown it more than I have, at least the dice.
I've had some light bulb moments with it, and I hate talking about it because it's just...
Well, we won't. You can tell me about it later.
I mean, I've seen things, I guess. That's all I know. And I'm still learning, and I guess I'm never one to feel like I've got it figured out. And what I love about Japan is I feel like they are on that same program I am of just we never have it fully figured out, and we're always, changing and adapting and looking for that next thing. And I just like I feel like you being a connoisseur, just the appreciation, the quality in the products they put out. I think, that's what the American tackle market's missing a little bit. And we've all seen that with big business, and, we're very money driven here. So it's a lot of times
a lot of innovation at this point.
It's
just steal whatever's from Japan and repackage it.
And it's sad, man. And I guess I have a special appreciation for those guys and what they do and the passion they bring to the sport and just the attention to detail, the refinement, and like they come out with the new chatterbait and they don't copy the last one. They make there's a specific reason for everything that gets put out on that market. So
that's why I'm so proud of those jigs. It's like
totally,
I've tweaked a lot of baits and stuff, but that was the first thing I really feel like I made something that was legitimately different, that's good or better or best on the market. That it's like I won't be surprised if it gets knocked off in 6 months or by next iCast. 4 different companies has a ringed hook.
This is, to me, like what I appreciate about the JDM market is the exact thing you did with this jig. This is the right jig. This is the right. It's $9. That's why it hasn't been done before, right? Yeah. That's why American tackle companies, in my mind, have this completely backwards.
And I wish it wasn't, because I wish it were $1 a piece, because I'd sell.
Oh, who
way
doesn't,
more.
right?
It's just we can't do it, and that's why going back quickly to all terrain. Like, they knew I had something similar to this, and they knew I had the Ned rig with that hook.
God, that is good whiskey. Yeah, yeah.
But I wanted it with that hook, and they weren't willing to pay the premium necessary to build what I needed to build to want to put my name on it.
I respect that, Austin. And everybody's got their own business model, and everybody's got to look out for that. But
Yeah,
I guess in my mind, I'd rather see you put out something that is the most gangster thing in the world, and maybe you only sell 10,000, right? Versus, like, what seems to happen is you hit the gas, like companies hit the gas on something that ain't that good, and they make, and the American tackle model is make fucking 100,000 of something that is fucking half shit,
Right.
or it's good, so now we're gonna make 200,000 of it, and it's not as good anymore.
Yeah,
I mean-
I'm there with you. Like, look at how one of those Koikis are what, $38, $32.
50.
Are they that much now?
Yeah. Well,
Again,
the regular
one hairy
Koike.
dice, they're $4 a piece, like 16 for 4 of them.
It depends. There's enough hairy dice out there now.
I mean,
like
the
OG,
OSP.
The OSP are $20 for 4.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
$5 a
like-
pop.
And,
However,
I mean, they do last a little while. Like, if you're gentle with them, they'll stay on your bait for a good long time. But still, that's a piece of plastic.
I got a trick, and I guess anybody who bitches about the fuzzy dice price can fuck off, because if you use that G-Crack Nico Hack tool,
Mm-hmm.
plop it through, put the hook through, nail weight, whatever, however you want to rig it. I bet I caught over 200 smallmouth on this year, and I bet I used less than 5 dice.
Interesting.
And people buy Senkos with their eyes closed, don't bat an eye.
So-
And when we're talking about dream strollers, like, and jig heads, like, you want to have a better landing percentage. Like, this is worth it, dude, because
yeah.
like, we only get so much time on the water. You only get so much time.
A
You want
bunch
to
of
maximize it.
the other shit that I brought in this bag, a lot of it has to do with, like, that sort of deal, like keeping your bait on. Like, I know, like, you're sponsored by Arsenal, right? Or-
I just like Dan. I worked with him on a few boats, so I just he honestly made some Galaxy hats. So I'm not sponsored by him, but I support him.
oh, okay. Well, we can probably sell a bunch of these things. 'Cause,
Oh, they're
I
the
mean,
fucking deal.
So these are the silicone rings for Nico fishing. They make them, like, between him, I think, G7, a bunch of people make a
Yep.
different one. They make them out to almost like a 9mm, I think.
Different sizes.
Everybody runs this for a Nico, and it's the only way to Nico. Like, I hated Nico fishing when you were using the regular O-rings, because you'd end up, more often than not, when you made the cast, the bait would wrap around and bury the tip of your hook. And, like, you don't understand why you lose so many fish, but it almost ended up like I was losing everything, because the
hook's
hook would get
twisting.
flipped around and buried back in the dang bait, and you weren't getting a penetration. Well, this gets rid of that,
100%.
but that's only like 10% of what I use these for.
Okay.
So, like, I never ran a weedless wacky rig until I got with Ryugi and got their heavy guard,
Yeah, I want to see that.
like their heavy
yeah,
guard,
yeah,
their heavy guard talismans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, essentially, if you're gonna throw, you don't need to throw a weedless wacky rig around weeds. Like, you can snap a regular one out of most grass.
I don't disagree. It's wood.
The only
and
time
shit.
you ever need it is around docks or around wood or something that's like, it's actually gonna bite.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, like, this has like a relatively stiff weed guard.
Yeah.
So similar to the Dream Stroller, when you're setting the hook, it's similar. Like, you work it like your normal wacky rig, but like when you get the bite and he's like swimming away, you want a tighter drag, and it's like snap, and like
Sure.
bury that sucker.
Yeah.
And like, I'll run a 12-pound leader to like 10-pound braid, and like, you can put the berries to them and it's fine. And this is by far the best weed. So the most annoying thing in the world about wacky rig fishing is when you line up on a dock and you want to get it way back in there. So you freaking wheel off and you go, and fucking your bait goes over there because it tears off the fucking thing.
Yeah.
And you're just like, God, there goes $1.
Yep.
And you just break out another one. So these for wacky rig fishing, you put it on the same way you put it on a Nico, just like the center point where you'd hook through the middle. And you take this hook and you hook it through the bait and you hook it through both sides of the silicone.
Yep.
And it locks it in place. And you can throw it as hard as you fucking want and put it as far back as you want and like not lose baits. Like it saves you $1 million over the course of a lifetime with Senkos.
That talisman hook is a sleeper.
Yeah, that thing you can pull through anything as long, like if you throw that into a brush pile and shake it out relatively slowly or like are mindful with it, you can get it out of anything.
Yeah, I'm going to show the camera this hook.
So the other thing I like to run it on is Texas rig Senkos, like a weightless Texas rig Senko.
Yep.
A lot of people run like a 4-aught.
Yeah, how are you running that? You're talking...
I'm talking about, so like, you run a weedless 4-aught EWG on a Texas rig weightless Senko and you're casting it around, whatever. And eventually, like, you could probably get one fish out of it before the nose of it, like, starts falling down every freaking cast. And then you got to you either have to flip it backwards so you can get one more fish out of it or not. So I do this. This is a fluke, but I essentially do the exact same thing. I run that silicone tube up my line before I put it on. And you take that tool and you can lay it over the tip of the Senko where in front of where the Allmight line is.
Yeah.
And it locks the Senko like in position so you can throw it harder and it won't fall down on your hook.
Oh my God.
The same thing with like, so this is a fluke rig.
Yeah.
And I do it the same way because this, inevitably you're casting this thing as hard and as far as you can. I'm running on a bait caster like for herring fish.
Yep.
So you want to be able to get it out there as far as you can and you're sweeping it and putting a lot of pressure on it. So inevitably like it'll start falling back and back and back and back.
Yeah.
So like by putting this on there with the little arsenal tool, you lock it down and it won't go anywhere. It essentially holds it in place so it never moves.
Dude, that is a gangster trick.
It makes it way better.
I'm going to show the camera that just because people need to see this, because I've felt it firsthand with the Senko where you're pulling it through cover even, and like it's so soft. It tears pulling it through grass even. So like that to me is just allows you to be more efficient. Yeah, dude, that is...
So what other cool Ryugi stuff?
I'm into that. Well,
like a lot of this stuff is like, this is like tinkering stuff that I like, that I brought, that's really a deal. So
I like the tinkering
these
stuff.
These are the shrink wrap keepers that they made for their flipping weight or their flipping hook. Really, I go through like 500 of these things.
Sure.
Because you just keep the tiny little torch, and any single hook bait, if you like, I'll cut it a little shorter and melt it down onto the shank of the hook, but a little further back.
Sure.
And it keeps your plastic on 1,000 times better. So like that's the only reason I bought this grass piece.
Yeah.
Is because so at the Classic last year I was skipping a 1/2 ounce grass piece under docks.
No shit.
With a Kitech.
Cool.
And like Kitechs are great, but they're relatively soft.
Really soft. Yep.
But so like you skip a regular Kitech, even if you glue it, you maybe get like a fish out of it before it's just torn to pieces. Like just by melting like an extra keeper on here, it just locks everything down like 1,000,000 times better, no matter what trailer you're running.
That is a beautiful thing.
And before I got the Dream Stroller, like I'll put this on a Dream Stroller.
Sure.
Like I'll melt it on there just so I know that my Sakamata shad's not going to fall down. Like, you don't have to do it with Elastec. You glue that up, and it's there permanently. But Sakamata shad's a one fish bait usually. But usually you melt something like that onto it, and you can get an extra fish or two. It stays locked in a lot better.
They make all kind. Like, have you ever messed with? They make that insect keeper. It's like a prong that will go on. Like, you put your trailer on, and it's like a prong that will go over that. I haven't messed with that, but I was just curious if you mess with that too. They have so much stuff that, I mean, it'll make your head spin, but...
Yeah, I haven't messed with it very much because I hadn't had a jig really that I felt that was helpful.
Yeah, it
like
takes a certain jig head for it.
They got the little hook hanger that you can hang the wires, or like you can hang your... That's how I fish those koikis. They got that... It's a little like double... I didn't bring one. Double-lined hanger that like it makes like a U. One side's on the fishing line, the other side's on the shank of the hook.
Yep.
So you can put your like free rig weights on it.
I know what you're talking about.
So you put a small free rig weight on that, and that's how most people are, at least in Japan, are fishing that koiki.
Yeah. Well, there's a few different. I guess there's that Zappu RPZ stuff, which is the basically that unique clasp that allows you, and then there's the Nagale's quick changers, and then the through shot leader, and then you've got open swivels that you can add to, hooks. But that koiki thing, I guess, I do want to dig into that because it's a new technique that's coming over here.
Like,
and
Taku calls it a leaderless drop shot.
Yep,
basically what
Jica rig leaderless drop shot. But my question is how are guys fishing that? Generally, what's the go-to weight size for this leaderless drop shot? It's like a 3/0 circle hook typically, or 2/0, big talisman.
That.
Yeah. What, 2 or 3/0 version?
Talisman, or Ryugi's just come out with the Talisman Brutal, which is their like heavier one. And I don't know if they make it to a 3 or a 4/0, but that's essentially, we were using the 3/0 Talisman before that, but that's basically the hook you want.
Yeah. And then you're fishing it on a leaderless drop shot, so you're throwing it out. I mean, what weight are you choosing, and then how are you fishing?
It's usually pretty light.
Things? Sure.
And a lot of it's suspended.
So it's less on the bottom and more shake, like pendulum shake through the column?
Yeah.
That's kind of...
and I haven't caught very many fish with it. Like, I'm still really new to it. I own more of them than I've caught fish on one currently, but I know they have worked and like they have their time. I'm still figuring it out. Like, that's the other thing. Like, I feel for a few years when I first got on the elites, I got away from them. It's like, I'm just gonna fish what I know and like cash checks. And like, as I've been here a few more years, I'm back to like, I want to tinker more. So like, I gotta buy $100 worth of every new thing just to like see if it's gonna work or not. Mm-hmm. And half the time it doesn't work, but the problem is it probably does. I just haven't figured out the right way of doing it yet. Yeah. So like, I'll go back to something that I had to dig out and we're like, oh, now this is the deal now.
Well, there's a situation for everything, and it feels like the Japanese are so refined that, yeah, it's maybe not the perfect thing for every situation, but this situation, that koiki, the only place I've got it to work is Mille Lacs. I wait like pissing off boulder fish.
Really? A big one, or
the 17? So the medium one.
Okay.
So not the full cast, but the size below that. Not the 13, but the 17. Gotcha. Blood red one.
Interesting.
And
I've only ever caught largemouth with it, and it's always been bedfish.
It was just, there were 6 fish on a boulder, or it was a bedfish, and I couldn't make them bite, and I could make them all react, and one of them would eat that, or it would piss off the bedfish enough. The problem was they wouldn't hold it in their mouth a little bit, but that was the only little experience I had, and it wasn't like the deal. It was like a cleanup kind of tool.
Mm-hmm. I haven't figured out. I mean, Taku caught like 40 pounds.
Biggest bag on the Elite Series last year, low key, I guess, from what I heard, is caught on the koiki.
Partially. Yeah.
And then when the camera one I was kind of happy that when the camera was in his boat that he didn't bust the same bag the next day, because I feel like Well, maybe I'd know how to fish it better then, but
Yeah, I don't know. What else do I got? So do you know what this is?
I have no fucking
know
clue what that is, bud.
UV resin.
I need you to
Have you
school
played
me.
with UV resin?
I'm familiar a little bit, but this is we're just talking jewelry and craft making UV resin. So this is just shit you would apply to hard bait.
So if you think like epoxy,
Yep.
epoxy, so it's similar but different. So this dries like rock hard, like a plastic, super clear, whereas epoxy dries slower, kind of stays kind of tacky, like will give a little bit.
Sure.
I've been using this for the last couple of years. The other cool thing about it is so it'll go from a liquid, it'll stay a liquid until it's hit with a UV light. So like it's easier to work with.
Okay.
And once it's hit with a UV light, it goes from a liquid to a solid in seconds.
What is this sorcery you're talking about? Like, this is a bottle of jewelry goo.
Yeah. So like,
What do you put? Are you UVing your hooks and jig heads? What do you?
so like, if we put it on here,
Yep. So we're
like-
squirting this Jew out. We just jizz a little resin on this hook.
so like you turn it
here.
on.
UV flashlight it. How long do you flashlight them?
Like 30 seconds.
This is some sneaky sorcery, sir. Does that harden it or cure it?
Yeah.
God, that's crazy.
So it's basically rock hard now.
Yeah.
Like that's it now.
Yeah, you just peeled off a little.
But so like
It looks like this. See? That's
so
crazy.
so as far as like tinkering with baits, like a lot of you, I'm sure you've used these before. Fucking queen tackle, tungsten heads.
Never.
They're fucking junk, but whatever.
That's, I mean,
So the
I
thing
kind of
is,
asked
the
some
hook,
people before I
the
bought
hook
them.
is junk.
Mhm.
The fact that it's a tungsten friggin' minnow head is badass.
Sure.
I wish I could just buy it, but a bunch of us, so you can probably see, I Dremel out the hook so I can put my 2-aught 111.
I
So-
see that.
So like, Dremel out that thing. So this one's already been used, but this is a 111.
Uh-huh.
It's not the.
It's a heavy bastard. 3/8?
This is a half.
Half.
But like you can see, so like I do this in the boat because it takes like 45 seconds. I'm like, damn, I need a heavy one. So I carry a bag of jigs, or a bag of pre-drilled these things in every size, and a bag of 111 hooks. And in the boat, I can just squirt that into the gap in it, hit it with the light for 15 seconds, and like it's rock solid. It's stuck in there now. So I can build whatever jig head I need in a pinch. Like
That's what
if
you're
they're
using it
acting
for.
weird. I can do it with different sizes. Like they make that 111 in everything from a number 1 to a 5/0. So if I need to play with stuff, like this is how I tinker. So
Dude.
cool. So like I can't get this off right now because
So I'm
like,
going
if
to
I
show the
rip-
camera this stuff. While
so
you're
like
doing
this is another way I do it. So like I needed when I was fluke fishing, I like to lead weight. I also have the Ryugi keeper on this, but
that. I've seen that.
so like wrap your lead weight and then I painted a thin coating of it and hit it with the light, and now it's smooth so your bait will still slide over it even or cleanly without getting jagged, without the lead wrap.
You're a damn mad scientist, Austin Felix.
Like,
Dude, that's so cool. That's so cool. That is that laboratory shit I like. Big time.
Yeah, essentially this fluke rig that I was using for Murray is a culmination of a whole bunch of different like tricks I figured out. I mean, the other thing is I hang a Ryugi treble through it. If you remember those old school single hole punches? Like back in the day, you have the 3-hole punch to put a piece of paper in your binder. Like you had the single one that clamp.
Yep.
So I carry one of those in my boat.
Really?
And I'll
just
take
just a single hole punch.
Yeah, that's a single hole punch. And I take the Ryugi treble hook boxes. It's like a hard plastic, and I just punch out the plastic. And you can hang, like, if you ever need a stinger on your fluke or whatever, you put it over the bend of the hook, and then you take that hole punched piece of plastic and just run it through the hook. And essentially it'll keep your treble on there the same way. Who was it? There was what's the hook manufacturer? They make spinnerbait trailers that have like it's almost a bobber stop that they use.
Decoy?
It could be. I don't know. But essentially
Decoy's
they do the same thing.
Japanese brand
They slide basically like a bobber stop over the top to keep your... But it's just...
It's funny you say that. So this is a decoy versatile keeper that's...
Yeah,
it's basically probably a more expensive version of what you're doing, less labor.
Yeah, so if you would have melted this thing on there...
Right.
It would hold it on there. This bait's cool, though. Like, that grass piece is a cool bait.
It is a cool bait.
I bought it mainly for fishing wood, because fishing wood with a chatterbait is a pain in the ass, but because it's got a wire like a spinnerbait, it comes through there. It's got something to deflect it better. It comes through hardcover a lot easier. It doesn't vibrate near as much, but
I'm curious, I guess, the situations. So to me, it's a matter of, in my mind, when I look at the grass piece, I think down south, there's so many situations I could see it playing. And up in Minnesota, it seems like I can see a couple, but it seems like a lot more niche and situational in Minnesota. I guess, in my mind, there's a few things that come to mind when I look at a grass piece and what I know about a grass piece, but I guess, what have you found it to be?
Like I said,
besides wood, have you found it to be, like, when do you pick it up besides if you're fishing wood, or is that the only time?
No, I'll throw it. I will fish it with grass. I find most of the time, like a regular jackhammer is still the deal with grass. Although I have seen times stop and go with that. It stays horizontal when it falls, as opposed to chatterbait that likes to nose down.
Yep.
So you can get a few more bites, but mainly if there's something that's going to snag on, if you're skipping docks with it, if you're skipping wood, if you're fishing it around pad stems, like all that stuff is when it really... Cypress trees, like shad spawn around cypress trees, like first thing in the morning, like Harris chain. I ended up not doing it, but I found that bite in the morning. Like they love a chatterbait up there, but you run one through cypress knees and you're getting hung up every time. Like you could run that through cypress knees. And like bass hadn't seen it yet because they aren't used to the vibration that close to it. So it's kind of like, it's the in-between point between a swim jig and a chatterbait that when you need to switch from one to the other, that it shines for me.
Yeah. And I guess in my mind, I think of like cold front, yo-yoing a lipless type, like stop and go chatterbait fishing where it needs that hang time. And then I think about like a couple times I fished bluff walls in Arkansas where you had to reel something so damn fast that, like, you could reel this as fast as you want.
They'll eat it on Mille Lacs.
Oh, they'll eat it, I feel like anywhere.
Like
but
that was another
burn
thing.
The fuck out of it.
So, like, what, 5 years ago, scrubbing a Kitech on Mille Lacs in the fall. It was like the way to smash bags.
Uh-huh.
Like, I feel like it's less now, obviously, because of scope and everything else. Like, throwing a Kitech way out and, like, scooting it along the bottom, you're not going to catch a ton. But I feel like that's another place where that would freaking be the deal. If you could let that sink to the bottom, it'd be essentially the same thing, but all of a sudden you have that extra vibration. Like, maybe springtime. Like, I haven't had a chance to play with it in the springtime, but, like, there's places that I haven't had a chance to use it yet that I feel like it might be like a light bulb moment.
Well, I've seen it. I guess I have a lot of time on the water, really cold water, like when they quit eating a chatterbait and will only eat a blade bait because the movement that it takes that chatterbait, bait moves too far versus a blade is, and I'm curious is that what you were getting at with this? Like that kind of deal, like cold water, more responsive, less movement, like trigger bites in colder water better than other baits? Because I'm a blade bait fanatic. I love really cold water smallmouth fishing. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I guess I never thought of this as a tool for that. So is that what you meant by that?
Kind of. Yeah, it's just, I'm thinking that early spring when bass will eat up lipless.
Yep.
Or when they're in the dead pad stems, or when they seem to like a lot of vibration, but they need something slow, like you put a 3.8 Kitech on that, and you should be able to wind it even slower than you could possibly ever wind. Like a 3/8 ounce ball head with a Kitech, you're going to have to wind faster than that.
Yep.
To keep it on the bottom, because you got all that extra resistance. You're going to have to slow that thing way down. Like, if you can get something that'll thump and still have the tail kick. The other thing is the fact that you can't, well, you can, but I hate running a chatterbait with a Kitech, like a regular jackhammer with a Kitech. It's a waste of time because the blade disrupts the water, so the tail doesn't have its normal kick. Like, it just gets weird.
Yeah. I agree with you.
So because that is above the bait, it's not disrupting the bottom. The boot of your Kitech hangs below the bait, so it's not disrupting it. So you're still getting the same kick while you're getting the vibration.
Sure.
So it's just, I feel like
I never thought of it that way with that bait.
So,
but it makes sense because I've had days that Zappu makes this the Para R, Peller R, that propeller, screw in propeller.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had days in the early spring where you just lighten up your jig and put that propeller on the back to get the resistance, and it was like a light bulb. Like being able to hover, like everything the concept of hovering and slowing your bait down and adding some vibration to the back end of it was a complete light bulb moment. So everything you're saying with this makes perfect sense in the same way, because you've got, instead of a propeller that's resistance, right? Because propeller's pitch and thickness, it's going to determine how easy it spins. And what I've noticed about the grass piece is that blade is so damn thin. And I tried to make that propeller, and I've, like, my big tinkering, I guess, thing has been like the hair jig thing. I tie hair jigs, and like I had a thing where I put a propeller on it on a hair jig, and I was able to throw a heavier one, throw it farther, right, and make it hover better. It did, especially if it was windy or in certain situations. It still is something that I utilize, but what I noticed is the thickness of the blade makes way more of a difference than I thought, in terms of if we're talking about a pitched propeller rotating. So when I look at like a chatterbait, which I'm no chatterbait expert, I have all but questions, and I've had some success with it, but the thinness of this blade to me is I think magical, in terms of you can see that when it falls, that blade has a pitch that is quicker, right? Just like a thin propeller seems to spin easier, right? And I think, like, in America, we just don't seem to fucking think about that shit as much. that was kind of quite the rant and monologue, but thank you for listening to me throughout that process.
No, you got it.
I don't know shit. But
like I did something similar to, like you're saying, you put spinner. So on St. Clair, like we could get some fish to eat a spy bait. But they weren't eating it that good, and you had to reel it so slow and let it sink. Like it doesn't work that well in deeper water. Like I mean, we all saw old videos of Aaron Martin's like sinking it down 30 feet and slow rolling it, but you had to cover more water at St. Clair. So like I actually broke a spy bait into pieces and stole the blades, and essentially did something similar where I took a 3/16 ounce queen head that I dremeled out with my hook so it didn't have any sort of keeper on it, and I slid a spy bait blade onto the hook keeper, so I had a spy bait blade, and I took and then I shoved a oh, my brain just went blank.
A stopper of some sort?
Yeah, I shoved like a bobber stop on afterwards. But I took the two little, so the one I broke apart was a Lucky Craft one. It has like two of these tiny little like steel O-rings that are in between them to keep them spin in between the blades. So I shoved those on there, and then I shoved the bobber stop on there, so it kind of held it in place. And then like I shoved just a flatworm, just a brownback flatworm on there, so I could like get it down there so it sink faster, and like it actually worked, not well enough for them like, oh, this is the next big thing, like it'll still take some tinkering, and I only made one of them, but like that's the kind of shit like I was doing in the middle of the Bassmaster Open during practice. I'm like, let's break this apart and see what happens.
Dude, you're speaking to my soul right now, because I guess where it started with the hair jig and the marabou jig for me was I got big into tying marabou and like learning how to do it the right way, like through doing it the wrong way for probably a year and a half, right? And just going through that, learning to tie marabou the right way. And it started with jig head, propeller, marabou is where it started. Could not make it work. Still cannot figure out how to make it work. And it ended with marabou propeller on the back, right where the marabou ended. And then if you got a thin enough propeller, the right stiffness of the trailer on the marabou, you're able to levitate an 1/8 ounce, like a 16th ounce, and pull more fish in. And I noticed that when fish would follow, like they'd commit sometimes. So like where it started versus where it ended, I just gave up on like threading that propeller onto a shank and like doing that stuff. But I feel like it's the only thing I've ever came up with. It's the only thing that I guess that I feel like nobody told me to do it. The only thing I feel like I've done myself is that, and I've only talked about it. I've cut it out quite a few times of the podcast, but it's something that I've done that I need to throw it more.
Yeah.
Because Bankston, I remember I told him about it, and he went and beat up all his fish in practice for the state tournament too hard to probably make it happen tournament day. But I know there's something to it in dirtier water hair jigging or windy conditions hair jigging. But I guess I have a special appreciation for, I think, how you think, because I think I would love to have your experience along with, you know, what I'm thinking through. And I just I've got an appreciation for people who have that attention to detail that you have, or like what I think I have is I think we all have a level of autism. I think that I have autism, like when it comes to this kind of shit. Like I can't make spreadsheets, Austin, but you give me bass fishing tackle and like some shit I'm obsessed with, and I'll make you spreadsheets till you fucking can't read a spreadsheet anymore. And I guess there's a special level of OCD, I think, that we get with the sport and the passion. And I guess what's cool about what you're doing is now you get to see it on the market. You get to freaking actually all this work you've put in your whole career, dude. You get to start to reap that rewards. Hopefully, I don't know if it's royalties or what it is, but I know the galaxy is going to be supporting you as a bastronaut with these fucking heads, not just to support you because you made the right fucking mousetrap, bud.
Yeah, I hope so. Like, Tree Shaker isn't a big company, but Tim has been a friend of mine for a long time, so we're just hoping we can get enough of them out there to
sell to a private equity group someday.
Well, just yeah, I wish. Fortunately, I don't know any of the company.
Like, can you believe? That's the thing with private equity.
I get a few cents every time somebody buys one or breaks one off, so.
Give Felix some shekels, for God's sakes. We have opened up the book of Felix tonight, and the scrolls of Minnesota bass fishing are not complete without the book of Felix. And you know what? The best way you can support Mr. Felix and future generations reading the book of Felix is getting yourself a Tree Shaker Dream Stroller in the 1/8 through 3/8 ounce variety. Shake a minnow like you never shook one before. My question is Minnesota, that's where I tournament fish for the most part, and like, this has become an absolute weapon everywhere in the country, right? My question is how many tournaments can be won in Minnesota shaking a minnow? And I guess, do you feel like we are underthrowing it in Minnesota still? Because I feel like it's still not there yet here. Like, certain lakes, sure, Pokegama, Mille Lacs, smallmouth fisheries, we know it's a thing. Mm-hmm. But largemouth, shaking a minnow, I've seen it. I've been in the boat with you. We didn't catch 20 pounds doing it, but we caught the fuck out of some bass shaking a minnow for largemouth. And I've done the same thing, but I can't tell you I've seen it where I'm like, I'm shaking a minnow for a largemouth today in Minnesota. And I guess I want to know your opinion on that, because
the problem is I'm so out of the scene in Minnesota tournament fishing now. Like,
I know.
I fished Denny's for the first time, and I recognized 10 people. I'm just like, golly, and they're all still great anglers. Like, that's where you go to cut your teeth. It still is, but my schedule is lined up between the schedule. So when COVID happened, everybody got locked into fishing. Everybody decided they wanted to tournament fish. So if you wanted to fish a tournament trail, you had to sign up the day it came out, and you had to sign up for all of them.
Okay.
So that's...
Yep.
COVID is also the first year I joined the Elite Series.
Right.
So, like, I couldn't fish the whole division.
Uh-huh.
So... And it's been like that for several years, where I haven't been able to fish anything. Now, Denny's has new ownership. They kept a couple spots open for us guys that have moved on. Seth fished last year. Brad fished. And they're letting us do that. So that's great. I'm going to be able to fish like a couple events when I'm here. But the only tournaments I fished in Minnesota in the last couple of years was last year's Denny's, and then the last like three years I fished that auto glass tournament on Mille Lacs that's in the fall. It's like a measure weigh release.
Yep.
And like, I do that to fish with Andy and to have fun. Like, it's still a $10,000 tournament first prize. It's still a big deal, but like, it's catch, measure, release. Like, you got to go in there with, like, don't get too intense. Like, I'm here to have fun and just, like, have a good time and hopefully cash a check.
Right.
So, like, I'm out of the Minnesota scene more than I'd like to be.
Yeah. I guess for me, I get that, but
I'm sure it's still underutilized. Like, I have 100% definitely it's underutilized. But I haven't spent enough time on Minnetonka. Like, I've spent 3 days on Minnetonka that weren't practicing for a spring tournament. I maybe spent 3 days in the last couple of years. So I haven't had the time to see how or if you can pair it with a deep coontail bite or with that coontail sort of shelf bite or not. I assume you can. If people were catching... if people are catching them on the chicken, like
Right.
it should be an even a relatively smooth transition to figure out how to make that work.
I've caught fish doing it, but I cannot catch the caliber of fish. Like it seems like those big ones. I can't catch those big ones. That's all you,
This
bud.
nicotine.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep, doesn't mess up your teeth.
I was just making sure it wasn't something weird you're trying to give me. I'd have fucking fallen off this skinny ass chair.
No, sir. No. It seems like I can catch fish doing it, but it's not like the deal. So, here's a call out. Bass Galaxy. If you won a tournament in Minnesota shaking a minnow for a largemouth, shoot me a personal message. I'd like to dig into this because, my goodness, I'd be curious if we're all getting our butts whooped on it. Nobody's.
I've caught a
Like-
couple monster bags in Minnesota shaking them.
Is there a time of year you feel like it's better? Any time of year.
That
I mean, I've seen things.
that technique is
Yes.
season agnostic.
I don't disagree, and you were the first one to light bulb it, and then off my dock in the swamp, Father Gill showed me, and I picked it up, caught a 3-pounder. Like,
And he
shaking
probably
it
knows
and-
more about it than I do, or like
Well,
similar amount. I wouldn't be surprised. Like
I look up to both of you, and I guess I don't know, but I know he's the best I've ever seen at it besides you that I've been in the boat with.
we were just catching small ones and walleye that day.
We were catching what was in front of us, Austin. We were catching what was in front of us. And for me, like going into the boat that day, I found like they texted me the night before. They're like, Austin doesn't have a boat. Can you take him with tomorrow? I was like, shit, yeah. I'm going to take him to my top water spot in the morning. And if it goes great, if it doesn't, whatever. And I'm literally just going to let him have the trolling motor the rest of the day, and I'm just going to watch. That's what I told myself that morning. And I guess it was maybe it probably wasn't that memorable for you, but I had a good time that day. And yeah, just watching you work, watching you operate, watching how you think and approach it is I just love it, dude. I'm a fucking crackhead with this sport, and I just I have a lot of respect for guys who put their time in, guys who put the work in, and I put a lot of work in, and it's amazing how much work you can put in, and your direction just might be a little bit wrong. And I think, fishing is an interesting sport where you spend a lot of time and like you get these light bulb moments that are like a Harry Potter spell, if you will, right? Like
Yeah,
how I learned how to fish a jig and fish deep water. That 30 minutes of learning how to do that from Doug Petrak and shake a jig and feel a jig offshore and fish in 18 foot of water when I was 14 years old, that half hour of my life was more monumental than a lot of 12-hour days I'd spent.
That's kind of what a lot of us do the tournament thing for. Like that's what I do it for. Like one of the best feelings, like winning Oahe was amazing. Like it's
dude.
once
I
in a
wanted
life.
to get to that today.
Hopefully not once in a lifetime, but
it's not.
like the best feeling that you can essentially redo at a moderately consistent basis is when you go to a lake and you're in practice and something clicks when you actually figure out the pattern
Better than sex.
and you're like, oh, this is it. And you like, let me double check. And you run 5 miles away and freaking find the right deal and do it again. And you're like,
Ladies and
Fucking
gentlemen,
A,
that's
that's
better
it.
than sex, baby. Oh
you're
my
like
God.
6 to midnight.
Yeah. Real quick. Whomp.
But you're just like, God, and you're just like, oh, I hope this. It's just the coolest thing ever. One of the coolest patterns I ever found out, I'm sure you've probably watched the videos, the Champlain tournament where I was spy baiting all the buoys.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Walk me through that. Let's
so like,
let's
you
dig
know
into
how like 6 tournaments in a row over like 2.5 years was won by people fishing cans
I did not know that.
on Champlain.
I did not know that.
So like, I don't remember, what is this, like 3 years ago? 3 or 4 years ago, I don't remember. I was there, practice, I found the mooring buoys, like the small ones on Champlain. Have you ever been to Champlain?
I've never been there.
Okay, well, they tie up the sailboats on these like
Yep.
posts.
Posts.
Yeah, they have like a giant piece of concrete the size of this table if it were squared off, and they have like a post coming out of it with like a ring, and they'll tie their sailboats off to it, and so it can float around, and it keeps it off because they got that giant skeg. They got to keep it away.
Versus like the double basketball buoys that we see sailboats.
They'll do that too.
Okay.
Like they'll put a buoy on the line because they have a short line off of the ring.
Sure.
So they have like a buoy on the ring so like they can get to the ring and hook up their boat. I figured out between that and then the main channel buoys, they could be anywhere from 30 feet to like God knows how much, like 100 feet deep. Whatever reason they were. In practice, I was like, there's a fucking school on every single on the main cans that were channel markers. It looked like a Christmas tree, and I'll pull up a picture of it so you can see it here in a little bit. And they just like lay up the whole chain. And then there'd be like a couple on these little mooring buoys because the mooring buoys in like 8-10 foot.
Yep.
But they were giants. They're still there. Like the smallmouth are on those still right today. Every time we go back there, they're there. They've just gotten so damn smart. They're like impossible to catch. Dang. But I figured out I could catch them in practice. I could catch one on a Ned rig or something, or I could catch one on a wacky Cinco. I literally just bomb one up there and let it sink. And in practice, I would throw the arsenal on a 4-inch Cinco, and I just tie my fluorocarbon straight to the ring so I could fling it out there and just pull it away from them, never hook one.
That's a sneaky practice tool.
Yeah. So, but they never left there. So like, I get a bite and I just troll up and look at them and be like, those are 4.5 pounders. They're giants. And I just like, so I put after I did this like 10 times, like I had that moment where it's like, oh my God, like this is the deal.
Like, I'm so hard right now.
I literally like put my boat on plane about 30 yards off the bank and just barely drove on plane. And every time I saw a buoy or a mark, I just marked every single one of them. And that's where I'm talking about, like, you figure something out, you don't test it all.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I'll check it in the tournament. You don't need to fuck
with all of it. Right.
So, like, first day of the tournament, I'm, like, chomping at the bit. I go to the first one. They don't bite. I'm freaking, what the hell? Like, I run, like, 20 of these, run the big cans. I could not get any of them to bite. I didn't know what the hell was going on. So, I don't know why. To that point, I probably caught 2 fish on a spy bait in my life. But I throw the big one, the 100, because I can throw it on a bait caster and it fling it a mile.
Yep.
And you can put big enough hooks on it. Like, that was the issue with the spy bait. I felt like I lost 80% of them because you got like the number 8s. They're like that small.
Yeah. You got to skin hook them and just baby
You're
'em.
just like, oh God. And if you go back and watch the live or whatever, like, it takes me forever because I'm just like click, 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 just like waiting. So I run 15 miles of buoys. Like, I ran from Burlington all the way up above into like Kings Bay, if you know where that is. It's a long run, and I didn't have shit. And I had that 100 tied on in the box. I got an extra 30 rods rigged up that I'm never going to use, but it's in the box. And for whatever reason, I'm like, fuck it. I pulled it out and freaking threw it out there, laid it past the can, and just ran it to the can. And I felt it like tighten against the can cable and like pop free and just go, And I'm just like, and I caught one. And I freaking did it again, and I caught a second one. And then I'm like, holy shit. So I caught 2 in a row on like first can. The problem was all the way up in Kings Bay where I was, there was a ton of fish on those cans. But those weren't the big ones. The big ones were on the main lake, like 20 miles south.
Sure. But at that point.
So at that point, I was like, and that's where you got to be fluid. You got to be like, okay, I got to restart.
Yeah.
So essentially, I just ran back. You set up downwind because there's current and there's wind current and there's a little bit of current depending on how much rain there's been and stuff. There's always current running around that thing. So you got to kind of get the right angle on the buoy because if you're not, it'll pull it too far.
Sure.
If it pulls it too far on the wrong side of the can, you'll just kind of like get pinned on it and you almost hang up.
So it's kind of like fishing a wing dam or a current seam where you had to position your boat right and make the right cast.
So I went back through and caught a fish off of every single can afterwards, just back through, just like boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, this is fucking the greatest.
That's a gangster story.
It was so cool. And I'm like, I figured this out. And so like I did that every day, like all 4 days of the tournament. I'd run my whole line and then I'd run into the inland sea. And where everybody fishes now in the inland sea, like that's where the whole crew is. Like I used to have a lot of that to myself.
Sure.
Like before Scope came out and like the first year of Scope, I had already graphed the whole top end of the inland sea. So I had all these small rock piles in like 30 to 40.
Cool.
That I could just like run to and I could usually catch like a big one off of it. Off of like a couple of them. So like in the afternoon I'd run there and I'd run through my piles and like upgrade an extra 4-pounder or 2. And then I'd run out the bottom of the gut and I'd hit a couple of the buoys on my way in and like upgrade a couple more in the afternoon. But it was just like the coolest tournament ever. This is the first year I traveled with Brian New, who's one of my best friends now. Like we essentially tell each other everything, like waypoints and stuff. Like
I really like that guy.
He's great.
I got to interview him during the classic while you were fishing because he didn't make it.
Yeah.
Which he hates that I mentioned that.
So that was, so this was my second. So this was 2021 because it was his first year on the Elites. My second. I figured this out. And in practice, I'm like, I hadn't figured out the spy bait thing yet, but I knew the buoy thing was working. And he decided he was going to Ty. And I'm like, dude, Ty hasn't played for years. Like, I think you're making a mistake. If you get down there and it's not working, hit some buoys on the way back. Well, he gets back. He didn't hit any buoys, and he weighed like 14 pounds. He came in a minute late, too. So he was in like last place. And I'm like, all right, are you ready to fucking listen? And I like give him this, I give him shit about this all the time. I'm like, just fucking listen to me.
Yeah.
So day 2, like I was fishing from Plattsburgh north. Like I couldn't fish anything south. There's just, the lake's too big.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, all right, this is what you need to do. And we sat down and we marked every single big can south of Plattsburgh. I'm like, take this spy bait and just run every single can as far as you can south of Plattsburgh, run around and do it all. And friggin', he came back at the end of the day and had like 21 pounds. And I'm like, if you'd have just fucking listened to me day 1. But he didn't make day 3. And there was one can, he caught like a 5 and he caught big fish of the day. It was like 5.5, 5 3/4, something like that off a can. So I'm just like, God damn. So, dude, that's epic. So he went from like last place. He missed the cut only because he was a minute late the first day. If he'd have not been a minute late the first day, he'd have come all the way back.
If he'd have listened to you the whole time.
So it sucked, but also because of it, I knew all these other cans still had fish, and I knew one had giants on it.
Okay.
So day 4, I'm like, all right, I'm going to start south, and I'm going to make a bigger loop. So I made a bigger loop, and the first fish I catch on day 4, it was actually my birthday, is like 4:15. It was big fish of the day, and it was the
When's
same,
your birthday?
July 11th.
Okay. Cool.
So I catch that one, and then I work it and run it all the way back up. I ended up catching the biggest bag of day 4. So like if it were MLF rules in that tournament where they cancel anything, I would have won that tournament. But obviously, like I'm not promoting that. Like I don't think we should be doing that. But like if it had been that way, I would have won that tournament.
Yeah.
But
it's a cool story.
So we ended up, I finished like 4th or 5th in that tournament.
Sure.
And I'm good buddies with Matt Becker.
Fucking hammer.
He was there. I think Thrift was there and stuff, but like Becker calls
scary,
me. The
dude.
Toyota's there. You can get info for the Toyota up until whenever. They don't have an info rule.
Totally.
So he's like, dude, what are you doing? I'm like, you didn't watch live? I'm like, oh, you just fucking run the sailboats and run all the buoys with the spy bait and you'll do good. And I gave him that like giant fish buoy and he caught like a 4.5 or better off of it every single day. Like, which is a giant there. Like,
Yeah, that's a good one.
4-pounders are good there, but
That's
there's
what
a
you need.
lot of 4s, but there's not a lot of 5s.
I've noticed that.
So like
that.
I showed him that he does really good. He's on live for the Toyota the final day or something. I think they had live. I don't remember what it was. Or he just or Jody White just wrote it up because he was following him around or whatever. And then next year the invitationals go there and like half the field is fishing these cans. And I'm just like, God damn it. I'm just like, it was one of those times where like, I really freaking, like, I figured that out. And for like a year and a half, 2 years, like it was the deal. And I'm not saying that I figured out that there were fish on the cans because that's always been a pattern. But like I figured out like the pattern in the pattern at the time.
Yes.
And it's very rare that you can figure that out.
100%. And it's like we talk about that 6 to midnight feeling with bass fishing. That thing we're always chasing is that, right? Is the, hold my beer and watch this.
And like
right?
So the one thing that New and Thrift are known for better than anything else is when they got to Eufaula, one of those two are going to win. And it was all brush pile deal. And it was like they had 200 brush piles and they'd fish every single freaking one of them.
That's crazy.
Like, because they ran faster than everybody else. And he's like, dude, it's fucking brush pile fishing for smallmouth. Like, New was like, I love this. Like, this is my deal. This is Eufaula smallmouth brush pile fishing, but there's a fucking can.
Yeah, like, what if somebody put a marker buoy
Where
on
the fish
everywhere
were.
there was fish?
Yeah.
And it's like if you put marker buoys out, knowing the fish were going to swim to those instead.
But
like, that's such a cool.
But some of those main lake cans were so deep that like I only would shoot mine down 40 feet, my scope, because like there's no real reason to shoot deeper than that. But I'd go to ones that it's like 80 feet deep, and you'd throw it and run it by it, and you'd watch fish just appear out of like nothing, and they'd come 30 feet and just be like, shh. And you'd be like, oh God, here they come. And it's just like, and just load up. And it's like, they come from 30 feet down. Like, it was like the coolest thing ever. I got to see if I can.
Dude, you got me questioning, like, I feel like you've targeted bass deeper than a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like, everything you're just mentioning is like, my max is about 30 to 35 is the deepest I've caught a bass. And there's people I know who haven't caught one that deep. So
There's
like,
specific lakes, like you go to St. Lawrence,
right.
you aren't thinking deep enough.
I want to dig into some of that because
like-
I'm just fascinated by it.
Like when I won the Northern Toyota Angler of the Year 2014, I think it
That
was.
was Costa, right?
It was the Costa at the time.
Yep.
But it was the one year the Northerns were all smallmouth tournaments. And I'm just like, hey, that looks like fun.
Fuck yeah.
And like 4 years in a row before this, the Johnsons that won Angler of the Year every single dang time. It's like,
Johnstons.
they're like, they're ungodly. Like,
They are
what they
fucking
can do is like mind-boggling.
I've heard stories. And
But
it's,
like I Becker fished all 3 of those, and we had discussions like you're gonna have to top 10 all 3 of these if you want a shot at AOI. And I was fortunate enough to win Angler of the Year, but in the St. Lawrence
badass accomplishment, by the way.
on the St. Lawrence, this was before scope, so I was catching them off a 2D.
Okay.
And the deepest fish I caught was 68, and the shallowest fish I weighed in was like 52.
Shallowest fish 52 feet deep.
On
Deepest fish 68 feet deep.
And
On 2D.
on 2D.
Fuck,
And
that's
it
so
was
cool.
it was like scoping in the sense where you just drive around and you're like, there's one under the boat.
Yeah.
And this is when
It's tiny scope. You have a tiny scope.
And this is when I started running, and I still run it this day. Like when I'm drop shotting, if I'm 25 foot or deeper, I'm running a 3/4 ounce drop shot weight
Got it.
because it takes so long. Like even with that, like getting down 60 feet, it's like you're like keep going, and it just like.
Dude, I can't even imagine. I've never even tried to catch one that deep.
But so like I got these 3/4 ounce drop shot weights, and you'd hook one and you get them to the boat and they just be bleeding out of their gills just because all the capillaries are breaking and stuff. They'd be so rock solid from the pressure.
Yep. Dead.
That you have to put them in the boat and immediately stab them to fizz them.
Sure.
And like I wasn't killing them. Like we also figured out like when you're doing that, smallmouth fishing now, I actually learned this from the Johnsons too, is ice is your best friend. A lot of ice. You're probably not putting enough in. Phoenix boats have split live wells. They're
Amazing
not all
live
one,
wells.
but
Yep.
they're not all one.
Yep.
So like I put 2.5 8-pound bags of ice on each side in the morning.
Are we talking? So I have a question about that. Like, because people say store-bought ice, is like, doesn't matter to you?
No.
Okay.
Put 2.5 bags of store-bought ice.
Okay.
I buy 5 bags, and I also have a big bag cooler that I can fit 5 more bags in.
Sure.
So I'm carrying I start each morning with 10 bags of ice. You're buying $50 worth of ice every day.
It's fucking crazy.
But you fill your live wells halfway up so the ice kind of melts, put G-juice in each side, and turn it on recirc. Don't add more water. You don't want water pumping in. So as soon as you catch one, you throw it in there, you fill it up so it's full, and just turn it to recirc. The water's cold enough that it holds a lot of air, especially if you have an oxygenator in it, that
Sure.
you don't have an issue.
With the ammonia?
Yeah, you don't have any, especially if you put G-juice in, it's tending the water on its own. So
Sure.
you also have to make sure you plug your live wells so it doesn't run out, because your water will slowly run out.
Overflow, yeah.
Your overflow, even your pumps, like if you plug your overflow, it'll still run out through your pump slowly, but you can keep an eye on it. So you catch the fish, you fizz them immediately, like hook one, you can't get back down. Normally fishing, you want to get them in the live well and get back down, because your best opportunity to catch a big one is immediately after you caught one.
Yeah, they're
Like,
fired. It's fired up,
The
baby.
biggest fish does not bite first.
Real? Okay.
And
I wasn't expecting that.
I'll tell you another story about that in a minute here. But and I figured out that kind of a different way. But you can't do that because you have to fizz them or you're going to kill every single one.
Sure.
So you put them down there, you fizz them. It takes a while because there's so much air. It's like 30 seconds of bubbles coming out before you kind of flip sideways. And then you're like,
60
okay.
feet of bubbles.
Yeah, so you put them in there, keep it cold as hell. You want it 20 degrees colder than the surface temp kind of thing. And they almost go into hibernation mode. You think they're dead. They're not dead. They're really cold. They go in. They're
Belly up?
No.
Okay.
They're cold-blooded, so they just kind of like go dormant. And half the reason you can keep them alive is because when they go that dormant, they're not using hardly any oxygen. They're like, they're relaxed. Their whole system like slows way down. Like the same way in the winter, you said you're fishing super early spring, but they'll just sit in the bottom. And they don't do a lot. So like
Yeah.
so they can recover because their body doesn't need all this oxygen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you do that, and you're able to catch a limit, or again, you keep fizzing them every once in a while. Like once I make a few culls or whatever, then every hour or two I'll just like fill the last quarter up again, because it'll slowly drain out, and add another half a bag of ice to each side, kind of deal. Just keeping it really cold.
Dude.
But that's the only way you can do it without killing fish, because before I figured that out, I missed the top 10 on the Elite Series at the St. Lawrence twice because of dead fish. The year Shakurat won, the first time we got 100 pounds, I hadn't figured this out yet. And I killed a 4.5 pounder all the first 3 days of the tournament. And every single day I had to throw back a 5 because I couldn't get rid of that 4.5.
Because you had a dead
Because
one.
he was dead.
Oh, man.
And it cost me a top 10. I had over 50 after the first, like I was on my way to the Century Club, even with a dead fish the first 2 days. Like I caught 26 I caught 25-4, I think, the first 2 days in a row with a dead one, a 4.5. And I had thrown back a 5 both
I
days.
had no idea. That's crazy. So, like, that makes that big a difference there, and which it makes perfect sense that it does. And I guess, to me, what's impressive is finding those fish in 60 foot of water, because there's a lot of water in 60 foot of water.
Oh, on Lake Ontario?
Dude, the Great Lakes are, like, I have a special respect for you guys finding bass, like, offshore on those bodies of water, because the amount of good offshore looking stuff, like when I've gone to Sturgeon Bay or, you know, any of that stuff, dude, there's offshore juice everywhere.
Yeah, Sturgeon Bay I've never really fished deep. Like I've only ever
You don't
fished
need
the
to,
open, so
typically.
it's never really been a thing.
But, like, how are you looking for bass in 60 foot? And, like, all I can think of is, like, Green Lake and Spicer back in the day. We used to have a deep deal where you'd look at humps that topped out in that 28 to 32, because the sandgrass didn't grow that deep. So those would be cleaner humps, right? And they were above the thermocline. You know, so that was, you know, how I found some of the deeper fish in my life. But, like, I think about the Great Lakes and all the just, I mean, it's a fucking whole new galaxy. It's like
When I started finding it, I was side scanning, but the fish I would see would be on 2D. You
Sure.
wouldn't see them on side scan,
Yep.
even out that deep.
Sure,
And
right.
it'd just be like, oh, there's a mark 40 feet down in 60. And it just like, I happened to find an area that was the deal. The reason, to go back to where I said the big one never bites first.
Yeah, I want to. Yeah.
So, my rookie year, we had a Champlain tournament, and then we had a St. Lawrence tournament, but we had a week off in between. So, or maybe it was even 2 weeks. I don't remember what it was. But, so we had fished the Champlain tournament, and we went up to St. Lawrence, and we were screwing around. How did it go? Do we have Anyway, that's not the most important thing. But so whatever happened, we had our Champlain tournament. I had found these fish. I ended up finishing 20th, something like that. But like, didn't do well enough. Like I found fish to do better. And we had a week and a half off. We were fishing St. Lawrence for fun. Oh, you know what it was? So we had St. Lawrence, or no, we had Champlain. We had like a week and a half off, and then we had to be at St. Clair. That's what it was. So we decided we were going to go up to St. Lawrence just to fun fish because we're not driving home. I was traveling with Brett Pruitt and Quentin Capo and a couple other guys, like Louisiana guys. They're not driving home and then driving to St. Clair.
You're eating gumbo.
So we went up to St. Lawrence and we were fishing for fun. And there was that, what's that rod manufacturer? It starts with a C.
Castaic?
Yeah, Castaic. They have a tournament series in New York.
Okay.
So there was a tournament going out of Thai. And you're like, should we just jump in it? Like, we hadn't been there since the tournament, and we were just fun fishing. But me and Quentin were still up there, and I'm like, you want to go? Like, we'll just go sign up. Like, I called a buddy who's from New York, and he called the tournament director, and he's like, yeah, you can show up and fish it. So we drove back down to Champlain in the morning, went out of Thai, drove all the way, or ran the boat all the way to the top end of the inland sea, and just fished the same stuff I fished in the Elite event like a week and a half before. Me and Quentin were. And it got to the point where I was running all these deep rock piles that I told you I had found before scope, and I'd throw out there and freaking I'd catch one. And so I caught one, and Quentin threw in behind me, and I caught like a 3.5, and he catches a 4. So like scoop the 4-pounder or scoop them both, whatever. And so we do that, and then like 20 minutes later, same thing happens. One of us catches one, and then we throw back behind it when it jumps, like where it had jumped. And the first guy had hooked a decent one, the second guy hooks a 4-pounder. And it got to the point where it was like, when you set the hook, the other guy just reels in. Don't grab the net. You just wait until you see where that fish is. And as soon as he skies, we're going to put it on the ripples. And every single time you catch a bigger fish would be behind him, following him, chasing him around. Every single time you catch the bigger one.
What? Okay, so what are you throwing to catch the first one, and what are you throwing to catch the second one?
Shot.
Yeah. Same thing for both fish.
Same thing for both fish. Drop shot, 3/4 ounce drop shot.
How deep is this rock pile, and is that fish above the rock pile now to where you point, like you're throwing to that next fish and like just shaking it above, like so that
this
next
is
fish
before
following?
This is without scope,
Right,
so we're just
right.
throwing it on top of the ripples where that fish had just. So like you hooked one, you're fighting him wherever he jumps.
Yep.
Those other fish are behind him, like, what the hell's going on?
Uh-huh.
So he goes back down, you're like, okay, he was right there. You freaking got to be ready. Put it on the ripples and let it sink down, and then pick up, and he'd be on there.
Do you think they'd eat it on the fall?
A lot of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as you
That's
pick up,
so
they're on
cool.
there. But it was always the bigger fish. So it was like eye-opening. Like,
Yeah. And do you feel that's the way, like, not just that time, everywhere you go, you believe that?
I think it has. It's not everywhere, but if the situation's right, if there's a group of fish, or if it's like a group of fish feeding on bait, that kind of like basin kind of deal that was going on, then like at least there, or like consistently you can catch. Like a lot of the biggest ones will let somebody else freaking do it before they get fired up.
Sure.
Let somebody else take the bullet for them. And it's hard to test it too much because I haven't been able to fish very many team tournaments since then.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's not that way on Mille Lacs, but it's so shallow on Mille Lacs that they're not really the same. They're not all getting fired up. They're not like out there hunting bait that much. Like I heard this year some guys were like catching some on bait. I've never really looked for it, that bite, but there's a time when that's definitely the deal. I've seen it that way. I've seen it on ledge fishing for largemouth, like the same sort of deal. If you can fire up the school, like the best time to catch a big one is right after. If you can get your fish off the hook in the boat and freaking get out there immediately, like that's probably your chance you're going to catch your bigger one.
I don't disagree with you. My question is in a single tournament, are you like, you're using too good of hooks to, if you could figure out how to lose that first one when it jumps and throw something like after it.
So there's kind of a trick that we can do, and I've done on Champlain, where it's like I'll have my 3/4 ounce drop shot just like hung over the side, But you can only do it for your first 5 fish, because once you have your 5th one in the boat, you have to cull before you can throw the next one out.
Sure.
But like your first couple of fish, if you catch one and put him in the boat, as soon as he's in the boat, you can have
make
another line
cast.
out.
Yeah.
So like you hit spot lock and flip the buoy, so your drop shot just runs down while you're throwing them in the live well, and you run back, click over, and bam, hit the next one.
Yeah.
But like it only works like a tiny bit.
Yeah, it's probably can never be the same as what you and Quentin like experience, but to me that's
But yeah, we won that tournament by like 1.25 pounds, 1.5 pounds.
cool. That's so cool, man. That's so cool.
I mean, we had like 23.5 for 5.
Damn. How long do you think we've been talking?
I have no idea.
Guess.
1.5 hours.
3 hours, 10
God,
minutes.
nobody's gonna want to listen to this.
Dude, this is one of my favorites, like that I've ever recorded. I feel like I got the most like real awesome Austin Felix that like this is the Austin Felix that I wanted for this podcast, and I feel like you were built for podcasting more so than like what you're propped up to do. Like for me, a 3 hour long podcast is like so much better than a 5-minute interview, because I feel like you are built for that long form conversation type of thing. Like I've just seen it firsthand, dude.
I suppose, like, obviously I've done other podcasts. Like, I don't understand how, like, maybe it's different. I don't know how many, like, podcasts you do just, like, talking to yourself.
0.
Yeah. So, like what Mercer does, what, like, freaking, like, a bunch of those guys, Luke Duncan does, like, that can just, like, sitting in front of a podcast. Like, I can't do that. Like, I just don't have the ability to, like, ramble on or, like, bring up enough information. At least I don't think I do, to, like, that would cause people to want to listen to that thing.
I like that we can get a real in the weeds like we did, like, and have the time to do that. Like, what's awkward to me, Skype podcasts are awkward for me. They're hard for me to, like, they always feel, there's a reason that I guess I do them in person, and it's because it feels, I feel awkward Skyping people. Like, I don't, like, it does not feel, Skyping feels so awkward to me. I feel like, and, yeah, versus, like, this, I feel like it was just, you were built for this, dude. So I hope we didn't drink too much whiskey, but I guess I do want to ask you, because I feel like something is, like, I meant to ask you about this, but you're a damn father now.
Oh, yeah.
What the hell? Like, I feel like you're just kind of, like, quietly rolling by fatherhood right now. what's that adjustment been like?
I mean, it's quiet because I haven't really had time to do much else.
Fatherhood is a lot of work, man.
Like, I had a son in July. He's almost 6 months now, but Aletha, my wife, went back to school a month ago, so I've been basically daddy daycare until I leave in February, and then we are going to put him into daycare. But, like, I thought I'd be able to get a lot more done. Like, my tackle prep is nowhere near what it should be or what it usually is. Like, previous years, I'll go down in the basement at like 11 and like 3 in the morning. I'm still just like sorting tackle, rigging rods and everything. And it's so hard to put the time in now. I'm basically just, doing the whole daddy thing. And it's a different change of pace. Like, I also was used to being from Minnesota. I'd head south and I'd be gone for 2 months, 2.5 months usually. Like, if I didn't have 3 or 4 week window, I usually wouldn't come home, because it just doesn't make sense, because it's so much driving back to Minnesota and back. But
Yeah.
so this year it's going to be a lot more drive back, even if I only get a week kind of thing. But
Right.
it's new, it's fun, it's exhausting.
Fuck.
Like, I feel this is going to be the year where, like, when I leave, I'm probably going to get more sleep driving or when I'm at fishing tournaments than I do when I'm at home, just because you got to get up at night. You got to worry about somebody else. Every time he makes a noise, you kind of wake up and
Right.
what's going on. It's just, yeah.
What was the hardest adjustment about having a kid? Like, was it the diapers thing, or what's the, I guess, what was the biggest, like, oh fuck, for you
No,
with
it was
a kid?
like, no, the diapers and everything. It was just the amount of time and focus it takes where, like, you have to put on them, like, your independence really goes to shit.
Yeah.
Like, you can't do like, I thought, oh, I could get some stuff done with one arm if I'm holding him and, like, moving shit around and stuff, but it's
Board
not that
games,
way.
yeah.
Like,
Sure.
you get, like, he needs a lot of attention.
Oh yeah. He's a fucking, like, he can't eat without you. Like,
No.
he'll starve without you. Like, that's a weird concept. Like this being's life is in my hands. Like, that's a weird concept, but
Yeah. And it wasn't planned, but, I mean, it's not bad. Fortunately, I got a boy. Happy with that.
yeah, I mean, you don't have to abort. It's a boy. I'm just kidding.
But it's
What's
just
his name?
Sterling.
Sterling Felix.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. He's...
I always told Bankston if he ever has a kid, he needs to name it Longbow. Longbow Bankston. I don't know. There just has a ring to it. But
Yeah.
Austin Felix, I got to be honest with you. This was a extra awesome time, and I would love to do this again. I don't know which whiskey I like better between the Elmer F. Lee,
Elmer T. Lee.
Elmer T. Lee, and the Weller.
12.
They're both some of the best whiskey I've ever drank, so I don't know which one I like better, but I like them both.
There you go.
This is Teal's Bass Galaxy, the sleepy assassin, Austin Felix, about to kill it in 2025. Checking in, checking out.